the Void, Series 1, Episode 5, O Come, All Ye Faithful. Written by Richard Marcus Powell. Chapter 1. The Cadir ship swooped down onto the gateway, activating the jump as soon as it was able to.
"Pursue the deviants,"
Priest Miller bellowed.
"Brother Alaric, how long until we're able to jump?"
20 seconds, Father, the ship's AI responded.
"Deacon Silas, as soon as we arrive in the target system, attack the enemy before it can engage slide. We cannot let it get away."
"Aye, Father." Priest Miller waited patiently for Brother Alaric to complete the mathematics that would allow them to jump, silently contemplating the hunt. They had been chasing the Cadir Holy Empire's ship for 3 systems now, edging a little bit closer every time. They needed to run it down before it reached any reinforcements. There was a danger that the ship could be leading them into an ambush, but there were quite a few systems reach from Cadir territory. It was unusual to discover a Cadir vessel so deep in UCH territory. There were raids and skirmishes all the time, but the raiders usually stuck to the border, where they could run back to safety when their righteous fleets descended upon the disgusting slugs. The Cadir Holy Empire was a vile and heinous mockery of everything the UCH stood for, worshipping their unclean pantheon in a corruption of the values and ethics the unified Church of Humanity cherished. Ever since the citizens of the Laval Corporation embraced the love of the Lord, they had been at war with the Cadir Holy Empire, and in all that time they had not been able to purify the deviants, always caught in a deadlock. The borders shifted routinely, ebbing and flowing between the two theocracies. As such, most of the border systems now possessed uninhabitable worlds, with any colonies that once flourished there cleansed by the opposing faction. "Jump initiated!" There was the characteristic shudder as they passed through the conduit, emerging in the target system within close range to the Cadir ship. "Lock and fire!" Deacon Silas yelled with fervor. The Cadir ship suddenly leaped into a slide, heading toward the exit gate. "Damnation!" Priest Miller cursed the escaping ship. He was only able to view its infernal geometry for a few seconds before it vanished, glimpsing its hellish aesthetic with primal disgust. The organic appearance made it look paradoxically slimy, and its slightly gothic appearance was a corruption of classical cathedral construction.
"Which gate have they gone to? Acolyte Landry?"
"Dentris Gate, Father."
"Plot course and pursue. We must not let them escape."
"Slide engaged to Dentris Gate," Brother Alaric conformed.
"When we drop out of the slide, fire all fast response weaponry. Got me with us. We'll get a good hit on them before they jump."
The Francis dropped out of the slide before the Cadir ship was able to jump. They fired all its lasers and other energy-based weapons, the strike hitting instantly, wreaking a large amount of damage on the enemy ship. The Cadir ship jumped, but left behind part of its structure, as well as a few of the Cadir themselves.
"We have them now. Brother Alaric, jump as soon as you're able."
"Yes, Father."
"Fire all fast response weaponry again when we complete the jump."
Priest Miller waited patiently as the seconds passed. They were close to forcing the Cadir to fight. If they could cause enough damage to make sliding or jumping impossible, they would have them trapped. Even so, it looked like they were getting a few extra seconds on their enemy with every jump. He couldn't explain why this was, as Cadir's ship were as fast as human ships. Maybe their leadership was just not coordinated enough. There was another jump, again appearing close to the Cadir vessel.
"Fire!"
The Francis unleashed a storm of lasers at the Cadir ship, striking them before they could slide. The superstructure disintegrated around the impact, plumes of fire emanating outwards from the damage, spreading out in all directions in radial symmetry. "Father, we've taken out their jump and slide capabilities."
"Finally! Purify the abominations!"
"Father, incoming vessels."
"Righteous! Unclean!"
A new Cadir ship appeared out of its slide, then another. 4 more others swiftly followed. These new ships were mostly cruisers, like the Francis, but there was one battleship there as well. As soon as they appeared, Priest Miller knew they were outmatched and that their deaths were certain. "Father, we are surrounded."
"Brethren, if we are to die today, then let us die with our hands around their infernal throats," Priest Miller resolved. Fire all weapons! Sing your battle hymns and rejoice!
The crew on the ship started singing in tune as they performed their functions, their spirits raised by the unity of purpose they shared. They did not despair in the face of death, but felt uplifted, assured in their divine reward. Firing everything they had, with no caution as to the thermal regulation or any other safety measures, they destroyed the ship they had been pursuing, but fell under a massive barrage of fire from the 6 Cadir ships. Priest Miller was thrown to the floor of the command deck as multiple explosions occurred around him. Many of the crew on the command deck were killed, engulfed by the explosions, or impaled by debris. The power failed, indicating that the ship was now dead in space. Priest Miller looked up and saw Deacon Silas lying on his back. He was groaning in subdued agony as he slowly died. Reaching out, Priest Miller grabbed Deacon Silas's hand and held it with a loving compassion. "I am here with you, my friend," Miller assured. "Peace be with you." He tried to get an idea of what was happening, but there was nothing left active to get any sense of the outside with. No sensors, no streams, and with the command deck buried in the center of the ship, no physical means to view outside. They were dead, and he knew it, but he did not feel bad about it. He attended to his duty, as any priest should have done, and was satisfied. "I die a happy man, my friend. We have lived honorable lives and served with distinction." Priest Miller laughed. "We join the ranks of the blessed." Miller coughed, expelling a that told him the end was near. "In space, there is nothing but the love of our Lord." Chapter 2. Captain Schaefer and Commander Voigt were sat in the main conference room in the command center, awaiting the initiation of a communication with the Admiralty. The Republic logo rested on the screen whilst they awaited connection to be accepted. Eventually, it was, and one of the admirals appeared. "Admiral Wells." "Captain Schaefer, Commander Voigt, how goes the relief mission?" "We're practically done. The ships arrived at their destination without incident." "Good. I'm afraid I'm going to have to reassign the Liberator as a matter of urgency. Instruct the convoy to remain docked until we can send an alternative escort." "What's come up, Admiral?" Voigt queried. "There appears to be a developing situation on the Cadir border. There's been a series of incidents that point towards an incursion of one or more fleets, possibly the Cadir themselves." "It's been a while since we've heard from them, but I guess it was inevitable," Schaefer sighed. "What sort of incidents are we talking about, Admiral?" "There have been reports of skirmishes occurring, witnessed by travelers through the system, and some ships have disappeared." "Have the Cadir been positively identified?" "In a number of incidents, yes." "You stated they were fighting. With who?" Schaefer noted. "We know if it were the Republic military ships." "We've not established that yet. We just know there's at least one fleet flying through those systems causing chaos," Admiral Wells stated. "And to that effect, we're putting together a task force to search those systems and hunt down the aggressors." "How many ships?" 50 ships of various sizes." "Composition?" 4 battleships, 5 battle cruisers, 10 cruisers, 15 each destroyers and frigates. The Liberator will be the flagship." "That's a heavy fleet," Voigt commented. "We expecting an invasion?" "We don't know yet, but given the Cadir's tendency to commit our citizens, we're not going to take this lightly. Better to have it and not need it, as the saying goes." "If it is the Cadir, this is going to end in a battle." "That's an unfortunate possibility," Admiral Wells stated. "We'd like a diplomatic solution where possible, but, well, it is the Cadir. They've never exactly been reasonable." "I would do what I can, but conflict may be unavoidable." "We know. We're already preparing for potential war," Admiral Wells admitted. "The Senate isn't happy about it, but they're realistic." "Have you approached the Cadir diplomatically?" Voigt wondered. "We've tried, but they refuse to speak to us," Wells continued. "To be expected. They don't converse with lower life forms." Schaefer thought about this for a while. The Cadir were a species that humanity had a fair bit of experience with, and it was all bad. They entered the galactic stage before them, but not by much, and they retained a similar technological level to humanity. Even with the technological stagnation humanity suffered during the Dark Age, this didn't affect the equation much, as the Cadir's progress had been stunted by their own dogma. They'd fought them before, and they were not to be underestimated. They were less agile than humans, but they made up for it in their zealotry. They were also remarkably difficult to incapacitate, so you turned your back on a downed Cadir at your peril. How many people have been lost on the ships that have disappeared? At least 650, but I'm more concerned about the millions who live in the colonies along the stretch of the border, Admiral Wells pointed out. They are the priority here. Protect them at all costs.
We will, Admiral, Schaefer assured. Where is the task force meeting?
Mission parameters will be sent to you directly, but the last report was from the Dessau system, so that will be where we start from. The fleet will meet there, and from that point, we will implement a dragnet across the adjoining systems radiating outwards.
The task force will need to remain within a certain radius of each other, so as to enable a fast response should the Cadir be encountered, Schaefer reasoned. Do you have any idea where they are heading?
The attack pattern appears random, not moving in any specific direction. Timing suggests that there may be multiple fleets, or it is split up. It's hard to be sure without accurate intelligence, though. With no knowledge of a specific direction, we will have to radiate outward from Dessau at first, Voight planned. But once any trace is discovered, the dragnet moves in a coordinated movement in line with the trail, following the fleet. That way we can all stay within easy reach, and no one is left exposed.
Agreed. We need to cover a lot of space, but we don't want any avoidable losses.
Okay, we'll inform the convoy team to remain docked and start making our way to the Dessau system. We'll update you if there are any further reports.
Admiral, before you go, how's the situation progressing with the Senator Nestor issue?
This is confidential, so this goes as far as those with operational knowledge of the situation and no further, Admiral Wells warned. But the Senator admitted to everything under questioning. He seemed almost relieved at being discovered.
What happens to him now?
He'll be prosecuted. Given the nature of his crime, he's liable to get a lengthy sentence. The Senate is currently debating what to reveal to the Republic. There's a lot of side details that have specific security concerns.
It's a sad end to the career of what I thought was a good man.
It proves that no one should be above suspicion.
You're right. Still. Of all people.
Right. We'll send you the mission brief in a moment. You should find a full manifest of all the ships assigned to the task force. If the Cadir threat is greater than imagined, then we can always assign more ships.
We'll inform you when we meet up with the task force.
Thank you, Carl.
The Republic logo appeared on the screen again, indicating their audience was at an end. What are your thoughts, Commander?
That the likelihood of there being a conflict is extreme, Voight summarized with a sense of despondency. There's been nothing but conflict with the Cadir.
That goes without saying, Schaefer commented, but it's unusual to have them violate our space without attacking a colony. Ships have gone missing and likely been destroyed by the Cadir, but no colonies attacked.
I hadn't thought about that, Voight noted. Maybe they were just in transit to their targets, but a random pattern would suggest otherwise.
Kane, have we received the mission parameters yet?
They've just been received, Captain.
Can you display the reported sightings and the ship losses onto the map of the local cluster? Keep it tightly focused and highlight Dessau for me as well, please.
Certainly, Captain.
A map appeared on the screen, showing a large swathe of space on the Cadir border. Points of interest were highlighted, along with a couple of data items next to each one.
Where was the first reported incident? Kane highlighted the requested item.
Right here, sir.
Can you animate the display showing the sequence of events?
Kane acknowledged, and a line started being drawn between the incidents. The first four were in close proximity, but there was a gap between the fourth and fifth, with the sixth happening soon after. Look at this, Captain. They jumped from Clanathis to Gorvalt.
quite a distance, but the timings make sense. They jump from Gorvout to Wanamaker. Again, this makes sense with the timings. But the next incident takes place in Zenis, which is a long way from Wanamaker. It could be reached from Gorvout in that time, but it seems unlikely from Wanamaker.
Hence the suspicion of being two fleets.
Yes, sir. But look at the way they're moving. If you take this path and split it into two, starting from Wanamaker and Zenis, shouldn't they be following a more linear path in separate directions? This seems a little too close.
Kane, can you reanimate, but make a split at Gorvout?
This would be impossible, Captain. The timings in jump gate topology are so close together that they cannot be differentiated into distinct separate paths.
Best guess then, Kane, please, Schaefer replied. I know this could all be wrong, but just for illustrative purposes.
Kane redrew the series of events, showing the split as instructed, and following two separate paths. Now look at this path. Doesn't it seem like, if there are two separate paths, they'd be a bit too close together? Voight indicated. If there are two fleets, they would have distinct purposes, which would suggest they would have different paths.
Could they have distributed the fleets like we plan to do?
Possibly. But to what effect? Voight mused. It's not a good idea in enemy territory. You want to keep the fleet closer together.
Yes, but it doesn't exclude the possibility altogether.
I know, sir. But to me, this looks odd. Voight intuited. Too close together for two fleets. Too far apart for a single distributed fleet in enemy territory.
So you think there might be some unseen variables here?
Yes, sir. There's something off about all of this.
Kane, can you back this up at all?
I'm sorry, sir, but I can't. I can't extrapolate enough of the data myself, but I do not have the intuition of Commander Voight.
Schaefer mulled over this. There was something in what Voight was pointing out, but it was something that just couldn't be quantified. If she hadn't pointed it out, he probably wouldn't have noticed it himself.
It's a bit vague, Commander.
I know, sir. It's not enough to make any judgments on, but I think we should bear in mind that this might be more complicated than what we think.
So, it might not be one of their crusades.
The most likely possibility is that it is a crusade, but we shouldn't discount other possibilities until we rule them out.
It's possible we're reading too much into this pattern, Schaefer advised. That said, we'll keep an eye on it nonetheless. Now that you've pointed it out, I'm intrigued to see if you're correct.
Yes, sir.
Chapter 3. The world of piety lay deep within the boundaries of the Unified Church of Humanity's territory. Piety was considered the home world for the UCH, as it was the origin planet of the religion. Like the Republic, the UCH emerged from the ashes of a corporate empire. Only this one had been known as the Laval Corporation, and its homeworld had been Rand. But when the UCH was formed, they decided to move the capital to reflect their new belief system. Rand was a symbol of the materialism and debauched regime that came before. It served no purpose now. Piety was a few hundred old calendar years old as a colony, and the UCH had been around for 50 years. As a result, the planet was largely agrarian and interspersed with cities built to a neo-Gothic standard. The planet's population was around 50 million, but it was increasing at an astonishing rate as pilgrimages turned into residency. Unlike Caliban, Soma, and Tian, the capital planets of the Teal, Hela, and Jung corporations respectively, Piety was largely unscathed by heavy industry. Not that the UCH didn't have heavy industry, it just preferred to keep the capital planet free of such things. Like Fade, capital planet of the Aleph Corporation, it was molded to project an image. As it was with the capital city, New Jerusalem, a large city containing a full third of the planet's total population, most of the city was built with a humble aesthetic, bland and functional, with large parks and contemplative zones. This architecture was broken up by the ostentatious cathedrals and other places of worship, which reflected the true nature of the UCH. At the center of New Jerusalem lay the central temple, a monument to their god and the Grand Harmonizer Pyrrhic Victory, his representative on this plane of existence. It towered over the rest of the city, clad in gold and marble, imposing its iconography over all else. Pyrrhic Victory awaited his cardinal in the sacred briefing room, swathed in vestments and surrounded by his personal attendants. He calmly sat, feeling his age. Now in his 8th decade, he tired easily, so waiting patiently was not the ordeal it once was. Ornate decorations covered every surface, and stained glass lined the sides, depicting scenes from the holy texts. The main door stood at the opposite end of the room, heavy and hewn from solid oak. Although they appeared monolithic, they were still automated. Piotr felt the style was more befitting a place of worship, but there was no reason to exclude the technology completely. The door swung open upon detecting an approaching individual, allowing them access. The man who entered was tall and imposing, giving him the appearance of a thug, but he held himself with discipline.
Your Holiness,
The man prostrated himself, settling on one knee.
Cardinal Kaigan,
Piotr acknowledged.
please rise.
Cardinal Kaigan stood up, slowly and respectfully.
What is the status of the incursion?
We successfully repelled the deviants,
Kaigan explained.
It has been a costly victory, though. We've lost 12 ships in total, including one of our battleships.
Though Kaigan was a hulking figure, he spoke with a quiet voice, soft and warm.
How many of their ships did we destroy? 20 confirmed, possibly 3 more.
Piotr considered this for a moment. All of the lost faithful aggrieved him, but they had died righteously.
They are testing us,
Piotr spoke slowly and carefully.
It's been a while since they last attacked us on one of their unholy crusades.
Ever since he was a young man, and before the Laval Corporation fell, the Cadir had been attacking them. They would send fleets to scour the border worlds, and then be beaten back to their own territory, only to repeat the process years later. Once he had formed the UCH, he decided to retaliate when they invaded, pushing into their territory, but it had only ended in a stalemate again. It seemed to be a perpetual cycle they were locked into. Though they were not the only ones to suffer the Cadir, Aleph and the Republic also shared a border with the Cadir, but the UCH had a much bigger border zone, which made them more likely to be invaded.
They will return, and in numbers. I know. Same as last time,
Piotr nodded.
It's a prelude. We can expect several more incursions before they start an offensive,
Kaigan described.
We should take the initiative here and strike before they come for us.
Yes, that would be the prudent thing to do. It's about time we purge those slugs, Piotr agreed. But they will be expecting us. It could end up being a long, drawn-out conflict.
What do you suggest, Your Holiness?
We need something to distract them, turn their attention away from us, maximize the impact of our purge, and minimize the loss of life of good men and women. Piotr could see Kaigan thinking. He knew of his reputation as a brute, but that was underestimating the Cardinal, for he was far more analytical than he appeared, and it was what allowed him to rise through the ranks. His raw physicality made him dangerous, but his intellect made him lethal.
For that we need someone else to attack them,
Kaigan added.
Easier said than done, though. The heretics and their corporations are unlikely to oblige us, as there's no profit in it for them, and the Republic are too interested in diplomacy.
What about encouraging another deviant species to attack them?
Harder to implement. Neighboring species are much further away, and we have no influence over them,
Kaigan dismissed.
We would be better off with one of the corporations. They're closer, and we understand them better.
If they won't attack the Cadir, can we goad the Cadir into attacking them?
If we would stage an attack on the Cadir that incriminates one of the corporations, maybe,
Kaigan considered.
At the very least, it would get them to split the defensive forces.
Can we implement such an attack?
Not with our vessels,
Kaigan determined.
We need to steal ships from a corporation to stage the attack. Their unique design will help convince the Cadir. Stealing military ships is no easy task, Cardinal.
No, Your Holiness, but it can be done, Kaigan countered. In fact, I know of several potential targets already. The nearest to us would be Cantor. It's an Aleph colony and shipyard which services the older ships. They're largely obsolete and in the process of being replaced, but this means they are not so well defended. There are other alternatives as well, but that is the first one that springs to mind.
Would the deception work with obsolete ships?
They're obsolete, but they're still currently in active service. It would work with them.
It does risk sparking a conflict with Aleph. We will get around to those heretics, but it would be foolhardy to fight them and the Cadir at the same time.
There are always risks with this type of operation, but if it works and divides the Cadir defensive forces up, then it will make it easier for us to push into their territory, and we will save many lives of the brethren.
Let the heretics fight the deviants. Let them suffer the losses, Piotr examined. It is an excellent idea, but the risk of failure troubles me. It could be catastrophic to us.
Both the fleet to steal the ships and the fleet heading into Cadir's space would have to be crewed by those willing to sacrifice themselves rather than chance discovery, and the shipyards and colony would have to be decimated to ensure no evidence is left behind. But it can be done.
We have no shortage of those willing to give their lives for the Church, but I would hate to squander their lives so easily.
Piotr grimaced.
I know that sometimes sacrifices need to be made for the greater good, but it pains me to do so.
I know, but their sacrifice would save so many others.
Piotr hung his head in remorse. If the plan failed, it could mean tens of thousands of righteous losing their lives to prevent war with Aleph. If it succeeded, it could save millions.
Do you genuinely believe this can work?
Yes, Your Holiness.
Then draw up the plan.
Chapter 4. By the time the Liberator arrived in the Dessau system, most of the task force had assembled. It was unusual to see so many Republic ships in a single location, but this was still a tiny fraction of the overall navy. The number of classes and designs on display was impressive, and a testament to the ingenuity of the shipwrights and engineers. From the popular Vindicator class to the rarely seen Indomitable class, so many classes were visible.
Hannah, could you do me a quick roster check to see which ships are not here yet? Schaefer requested.
7 ships inbound, 2 battle cruisers, 2 cruisers, 3 frigates.
How far out?
Furthest is 5 systems away.
Okay, we can address the fleet and start deploying, but we won't start moving the fleet as a whole until the others are here. Lieutenant Maritzu, connect me to the fleet.
The young lieutenant complied, connecting the quancoms of the ships in the task force. Each ship would have a senior officer in the command center that would be available to respond to the summons, so connections could be initiated immediately.
Connected, sir.
The main screen divided into 50 different streams, each showing the command center of a specific ship in the fleet.
This is Captain Carl Schaefer of the Liberator. It's good to see so many ships gathered together for a single unity of purpose. Even if the reason for our being here is not a positive one, it makes me proud to see so many sons and daughters of the Republic assembled to serve, and I have every confidence that every one of you will serve with distinction, Schaefer praised.
Schaefer could see so many anticipatory faces, and he knew his words would be carried on to thousands of others. Despite his stoic outward appearance, he still felt nervous, but practice had honed his performance skills over the years.
As you are all aware, we have assembled for the purpose of tracking down a potentially hostile fleet, most likely of Cadir origin. The fleet represents a danger to every colony along the border and beyond. The Cadir have a history of attacking our colonies and killing entire populations, so this threat is an extreme one, Schaefer emphasized. When we find the fleet and it is of Cadir origin, then the chance of armed conflict will be very high, so battle readiness is crucial for this mission.
He wanted to ensure that everyone was aware of the likelihood of a violent confrontation with the Cadir, so he made sure his pronounced emphasis was on this.
Millions of people are depending on us to keep them safe, so we will not falter in our purpose, and if the Cadir are here to rain down destruction upon them,
We will vanquish them and send them running back to their own territory, Schaefer determined.
He stated the last part with confidence, knowing full well that he had to show some steel to allay the fears and anxiety that may be present in the fleet. Truth be told, he suffered this anxiety himself, but he couldn't show it. It was perfectly natural to feel nervous before a confrontation, but fear could be paralyzing, so he had to demonstrate some fervor to offset this.
This is Commander Voigt. She will be coordinating the fleet when I'm unavailable or if I am incapacitated for any reason.
We will be deploying radially with frigates and destroyers spreading out 2 and 3 jumps away from the core fleet. Cruisers will be deploying 2 and 1 jump away. The core fleet will then progress along the trail as more reports come in, with the larger fleet maintaining formation. Voigt surmised. Fleet deployment will be communicated to each ship individually. Keep in regular contact and do not engage any hostiles without support unless you are attacked. Voigt was very nervous, knowing the scale of the fleet she was helping coordinate. She did her best to hide it, but little inflections emerged that gave it away. When she spoke with certainty, she sounded authoritative, but there were moments when she started to think too much, and her authority slipped a little. We've had a report of a ship disappearance in the Loomis system, which appears to have occurred after the sighting in this system, so the fleet will make its way there once it is fully assembled. The HDR Stanley and HDR Hemming will be the first to lead to Loomis, but will remain 3 jumps ahead of the core fleet.
We will get moving as soon as the remaining ships arrive, but in the meantime, are there any questions?
Captain Lennon, HDR Corinthian. In the event of the Liberator being incapacitated, to whom does authority pass?
Captain Latham of the HDR Ocasio-Cortez will assume command in such an eventuality. Captain Norris of the HDR Defoe will take up the tertiary commandship role.
Captain Kiran, HDR Damas. What will be the default battle deployment?
Good question. Each of the 4 battleships will cover a flank of the Liberator. Cruisers, destroyers, and frigates will form up around the battleships. Details will be in the deployment communications, Schaefer answered. Obviously, we will need to be adaptable during any battle that may occur. Anything else?
There was a considered silence.
Right. If there are any further questions, do not hesitate to ask, Schaefer offered. We'll keep the fleet space open until the operation is concluded. If communications drop out for any reason, try to rejoin the fleet space. If that gets knocked out completely, we'll drop to more traditional forms of communications.
There were no further questions, the audience waiting expectantly.
Once you have read the deployment instructions, please take up your positions whilst we await the final ships.
Schaefer scanned the screen of the 50 separate sessions, trying to gauge reactions. Most of the captains had muted their sessions so that they could convey a multitude of instructions as well as receive updates. He knew this was going to take some time. Fleets in general took time to organize. They were a mechanism with a massive number of moving parts, and each had to be configured. It would probably be hours before all of the remaining ships arrived, and even then, the fleet might not have fully organized itself. If there was an attack on a colony, they would have to respond immediately and try and reorganize on the move, but no distress calls had been received from any colonies yet. It perplexed him. This was a change in the Cadir's behavior. If they came into Republic space, which they did on occasion, they would not procrastinate like this. Usually the closest colony would suffer the brunt of their wrath. But this, wandering, it was unlike them. He started to wonder more about what Voigt had noted about their movements, and he was starting to concur that there was something odd about this situation. There was something they were missing. Chapter 5. It had taken a long time, but the task force had assembled and started moving. Progress was slow, but certain. It was the coordination that took the time, ensuring that every ship was in formation before jumping to the next system. It was necessary. If one ship started to drift too far ahead or behind, they could be picked off before the fleet could respond.
HDR Hemming, we have arrived in Loomis.
The rest of the fleet was in the process of jumping into the next system.
We found the remains of a humpback-class freighter here.
They must have entered the system before they were attacked.
Be careful, Hemming, Voight cautioned. How does the system look?
No trace of any hostiles detected.
They could still be in the vicinity, so stay alert.
We found the black box. Downloading telemetry from it now.
Acknowledged. Could you send us a copy as soon as possible?
Will do.
Voight considered the victims. There would have been around 30 crew on a humpback, all dying within an instant.
Commander, I'm receiving the data packet from the HDR Hemming.
Thank you, Kane. Does it contain any streams?
There is one. According to the data, they did jump into the system just prior to their destruction. I'll start the stream just before the jump.
Kane started the stream at the indicated point. It was a panoramic view of directly in front of the freighter and wasn't very encompassing, but it was something. Streams were common in black boxes, but it was mostly telemetry data. Exterior views didn't usually mean much and were nowhere near as useful as the data, but one or two did provide some context. Voight and the command center crew watched the stream. She could see a few people were distracted by the stream, keeping an eye on it while they performed their duties. Eyes on the console, Lieutenant, she reminded, the lieutenant sheepishly complying. The stream started off unremarkably. The audio was of the command center crew, and they were performing all of the routine functions associated with jumping to a new system. Poor bastards didn't know what they were jumping into. This was a major drawback of the jump gates. The jump itself was largely blind. You knew where you were going, but not what was on the other side. You could tell if you had some form of communication, so a friendly ship that had open communications could relay data back, but otherwise, it was extremely difficult to tell. Even the jump gates themselves could not determine this. They logged events so it could be determined when the gate was activated, but not what had passed through. There was a blink on screen as the humpback traveled through the conduits into Loomis. As they arrived there, they found themselves surrounded by ships. There was a pause for a few seconds and a sudden panic among the crew before the ships opened fire and destroyed the freighter.
That removes all doubt as to the adversary here,
Schaefer announced as he emerged from the conference room at the rear. Large fleet, too, Voight observed. Does the data give any indication to the number of Cadir vessels?
Data specifies 32 confirmed vessels. There are a few traces that could be additional ships, though, Kane answered.
Composition?
Schaefer demanded. Unable to tell from the data alone. They were destroyed before too much data was collated.
32 ships. But is that the whole or just part of the fleet? Voight analyzed.
Assume it's only part until we know better,
Schaefer added. If it's only a part, we're going to be outnumbered, Voight assessed.
We need to get eyes on the other fleet, if it exists.
There's no other reports at the moment. Some suspicious activity has been logged in La Lima, but nothing else.
Define suspicious.
Possible sighting, but not confirmed, Voight read aloud. One of those unexplained sensor reading situations. Could be anything.
Worth checking out, though, Schaefer mused. Do we have a ship near Lima?
HDR Herschel is 2 jumps out.
We'll start moving in that direction. I don't want the Herschel getting too far ahead, though.
If the Cadir fleet is on the other side of the gate they jump in on, they're going to have to slide immediately. They won't be able to survive that amount of firepower otherwise.
An emergency slide might be necessary.
Schaefer was doing some mental arithmetic and felt the calculations the ship's AI would need to perform might be longer than the ship could withstand. An emergency slide would take them in a random direction for an unspecified time. It was never that long or that far, but it was sufficient to avoid a fleet. It still took time to initiate, but it was shorter than a planned slide. It's a calculated risk, jumping through a fleet of that size, Voight pointed out.
We don't know it's there yet.
We could draw the fleet closer together. Cruisers 1 jump out, everyone else 2 jumps.
Might be a wise idea. Hannah, could you implement that, please?
If it is the fleet, it does seem like a significant course change, Voight observed. Sir, Republic Command state there are reports of a battle taking place in the Soon system.
How far away is that?
6 jumps.
If that is the Cadir, who are they fighting?
It's not us,
No reports of any military involvement.
Do you have a colony in Soon?
No official colony. The system contains only gas giants. There are refineries on those planets, but the total population is around 2,000.
Contact those refineries. Find out if they're being attacked.
Soon is in the same general direction as Loomis, so it does fit the pattern, Voight indicated.
Reorient the fleet. Make best speed to Soon, Schaefer commanded. All Vanguard ships, wait on the Soon gate.
Schaefer was curious about this report. If there had been a skirmish in progress, who could it possibly be with? Did the company mining in the system have its own military vessels? Some of the private concerns did equip themselves at such a level.
For undefended industrial facilities were always a tempting target.
It was usually pirates or some of the criminal organization that would be the normal aggressor, though, not an organized military.
Commander, any suggestions?
If we operate under the presumption of a second fleet, maybe it isn't a friendly fleet, but a hostile one. Perhaps the Cadir fleet are chasing it through our territory. That would explain the erratic movement and why the fleets aren't further apart.
That would make sense. But who would be the other faction? This base isn't really close to any other territory.
I couldn't say with any confidence. It could be UCH or Aleph, but they will be a long way from safety. Any Xeno species doesn't really fit. Either too powerful for the Cadir or too far away.
So this could end up being a three-way conflict.
He couldn't fault Voight's logic. A pursuit would fit the travel pattern, but why was this happening in their territory? It could well be a UCH or Aleph fleet that had been split from his territory and chased ever deeper into their own space. Schaefer did identify one flaw in this, though.
If it is another human fleet, why hasn't it been identified as such?
There's no way to say at the moment, Voight shrugged.
It's all just speculation until we get some actual information, Schaefer cursed. Chapter 6. The HDR Hemming jumped into Soon, acting as a scout, but found no trace of a waiting fleet. It was a common practice in these situations. If you don't know what lay on the other side of the gate, it made sense to send through a single ship ahead of the whole fleet. It gave them enough time to make a decision. It could be harsh on the ship that jumped, but preferable to losing a fleet. The rest of the fleet jumped through upon update from the Hemming. Whatever happened, it appears to be over now, Schaefer noted. Any trace of the battle? I'm picking up traces of debris on the Topeka gate. At least one decaying power core there, Denham responded. Keep scanning, Doctor. I don't want the Cadir surprising us, Schaefer instructed. Fleet, slide to Topeka gate. With all 50 ships in the task force now in a single group, it took a little while to initiate the slide for all the ships, as extra calculations had to be made to ensure there were no collisions or intersection of space-time bubbles. Eventually, all the ships arrived on the outbound gate. It was clear a skirmish had occurred. There was debris littering the vicinity, fragments of hull drifting aimlessly, the hulks of several ships venting gas. How many ships can you detect, Doctor? 3 at least, Captain. Can you identify their origin? They all appear to be Cadir, 1 equivalent to a cruiser and 2 frigate equivalents. Still no idea who it is they might be chasing. Not necessarily, Captain, Hannah interrupted. One of the ship idents is still online, and it's not showing as Cadir Holy Empire. It's not. What is it then? It's still Cadir, but it has a different designation. It's not something recognized by the Babel implants, but it suggests the nearest analog is the word state. This information opened up a whole wealth of new possibilities. Voight looked towards the captain. A curious expression caught on her face. Are the Cadir fighting each other? She wondered. This would be a new development. The Cadir had always presented a unified front to humanity, united in their fanatical hatred of lower forms of life. There was little known about their culture beyond their dogma, and it had always been assumed that this was all there was, that their entire being and culture was built around their belief system. What had changed to have them fighting each other? This makes sense, Voight reasoned. The travel path is erratic because 2 fleets are playing cat and mouse, which is why there are frequent changes in direction. They're in close proximity because they're hunting or evading each other and no other types of ship have been detected because both fleets are composed of Cadir ships. This also explains why no colonies have been attacked.
I'll buy that, Schaefer nodded, but it doesn't answer the why.
We still have to confirm this, but it does fit.
Can we confirm that the fleets passed through this gate?
There is recent activity, 2 separate jumps minutes apart.
Let's send a battle group ahead of us. HDR Avenger will take control of the battle group. Assign 2 battle cruisers, 5 cruisers, 5 frigates and 5 destroyers, Schaefer commanded. If you run into them, you'll have more survivability and buy us time to catch up with you. Captain Rashi, if you find the Cadir, try and get an idea of what is going on.
Now they were closer to their quarry. Schaefer felt a more densely packed spearhead would make sense.
I want 5 frigates and 5 destroyers radiating out as before, covering our flanks and rear, Schaefer added. But keep within 2 jumps. If you find anything, shadow where possible, evade if attacked.
Implementing, Hannah confirmed, organizing and assigning positions to the fleet. There was always the possibility that the 2 fleets had headed in 2 separate directions, though the gate logs would suggest otherwise. Either way, Schaefer would rather have advance warning. Captain, a cursory analysis of the damage sustained by the wrecks is indeed consistent with the hypothesis that the Cadir are fighting amongst themselves, Denham analyzed.
What are we getting involved with here? Schaefer asked rhetorically. Is this some kind of civil war?
In a way, if this was some form of internal conflict, it did lessen the threat to Republic colonies, as they would be focused on each other. However, this was an assumption, and assumptions were never to be trusted. As long as the Cadir were in the territory and equipped for war, there was a threat. They've never given us any indication that there was a schism in their society, Voight stated. As far as we've been aware, it's always been a theocracy, and an extreme one at that.
They would never deign to communicate with us, and there's been no history of any internal conflict, so we have no way of knowing. This could be a new development in their society, or something that has always existed that we simply haven't been aware of.
There's another wrinkle to this as well, sir.
What's that, Commander?
If we confront both fleets simultaneously, should they be in the same system when we catch up with them, what would they prioritize, attacking each other or us?
If there's one maxim that you should take to heart, Commander, it's hope for the best but prepare for the worst, Schaefer opined. Assume that they will combine forces against us.
It may prove more effective to target one faction ahead of the other. It may well encourage the other faction to take advantage, Voight postulated. If we target the larger force and defeat them, then we are only left with the lesser threat.
Shrewd thinking, Commander, Schaefer commended. That would work either way.
Even if they remain united, it's effective prioritization of targets.
We'll incorporate that into our response.
This made good sense to Schaefer. Exploit an enemy's weakness and focus on the biggest threat. Given that they were still not sure of the enemy's fleet composition, this was a wise consideration. Any advantage might prove critical in battle.
Doctor, see if you can determine what this new Cadir faction is all about. Any intelligence you dig up could prove to be crucial, Schaefer ordered. Hannah, can you run some projections based on the commander's suggestions?
Difficult to do without detailed enemy fleet composition.
I appreciate that and will take it into account, Schaefer nodded. But we'll start with wild speculation and refine it from there as we get more detailed information.
I'll do what I can, sir.
Now, let's see if we can catch up with the Cadir.
Chapter 7. Bishop Zalil paused for a moment as the UCH fleet emerged from the conduit. He had been granted the authority to lead this fleet by Cardinal Kaigan, with the blessing of the Grand Harmonizer himself. So few people received such direct blessing that he felt honored. However, when the objectives were revealed to him, he understood what was being asked, and he accepted without hesitation. The fleet was not a large one, but it was powerful for its size, and its crew as dedicated to the cause as he was. They knew dedication meant death, and they accepted the risk for the greater glory of the Church. Among the fleet were troop transport ships, laden with crew ready to take control of any stolen ships. They had a good idea of how many there would be in Cantor, based on intelligence they had acquired, but this was always subject to change. They made their way through Aleph's space without being detected so far.
their scouts ensuring that anything that could detect them was destroyed in advance. Aleph may have been notified that something was happening, but they would have no detail. That would change if they didn't react quick enough in Cantor itself. The system had the shipyard and a colony, so it was imperative that they shut down communications as soon as possible. Engage quantum static! Quantum static was a form of what used to be termed electronic warfare. It was designed to hamper quantcom communications, but it was an unreliable form of countermeasure. It worked to a degree, but the nature of the quantcom really made it unpredictable. Communication could still occur, the static just made it harder to send the packets of data. Eventually, they would get through. Battle Group 1, take out the communications hub on Cantor Alpha. Battle Group 2, take out the shipyard communications array. Blind the heretics. The window of opportunity was small. The sensor on the gate had to be destroyed by the scout, but sensors on both the shipyard and the colony would eventually detect them. With the destruction of the gate sensor, they could be sure that the other sensors would be trained on the gate within a short time, so they needed to react fast. Fortunately, sliding made the fleet invisible while they were in their own localized space-time bubble. It could be seen as an anomaly, but nothing else. The UCH fleet entered the slide, heading towards slightly different targets. The shipyard was orbiting the colony, but the best attack positions were slightly divergent. They emerged from the slide 40 seconds later, primed and ready for the assault. Target sensor array and fire, Priest Hoffman bellowed. Complying, the fleet focused fire on the shipyard's communication, raining down a mighty barrage of destruction upon it, annihilating the entire section along with a few hundred crew. Target destroyed. Battle Group 1 report. Colony communications destroyed. Excellent. Engage and destroy all defensive platforms, Bishop Zalil commanded. The defensive forces had been caught unprepared and were struggling to respond, but there were 2 cruisers and a battle cruiser present, and now firing. Target the battle cruiser. Primary target is the communications, then the weapons, Priest Hoffman yelled. Harmonizes grace, providence, and divine retribution. Target the cruisers, same prioritization. The outcome of the battle was never in doubt. The defensive fleet was far too small to resist, but the danger was the alert that they could raise. Every second that passed increased the chances of critical information being disseminated. The UCH fleet pounded the defensive fleet with everything they had. The battle cruiser did not last long against a superior force, but the cruisers managed to last a bit longer, their agility giving them the ability to evade some of the incoming fire. Alas, it was not enough, and soon they perished. Was any communication successful? Bishop Zalil asked. Some data made it through, but we estimate it was not enough to provide critical information. As the data was encrypted, it was impossible to know for sure whether what was sent contained any critical detail. But a low percentage meant relatively little got through, which meant it was highly unlikely. Target remaining installations on the shipyard. The shipyard had a few remaining weapon systems, hardly enough to fend off a fleet of this size, but it could do some damage over time. They did not last long under sustained pummeling. Battle Group 1, have you removed all defensive platforms? Yes, Your Grace. Raise the planet. Leave no one behind that could bear witness. Wiping out the civilian population was an extreme measure, but they had to be sure they could not be identified. Priest Hoffman, what ships are present? 5 Calliope-class frigates, 3 Anasi-class cruisers, and a Hades-class battleship. Good. That should be sufficient for our purposes. Deploy the assault teams. Clear the way to the ships and get the crews on board. Yes, Your Grace. Our ascent to glory has been deferred to another day. Praise be to his name. Amen. The fleet flagship docked with the shipyard, and the assault teams flooded into the corridors and gantries, slaughtering as they did so. Nobody was spared as they mercilessly stormed towards their destination. They worked their way through methodically, encountering minimal resistance before they had secured the vessels. The crews entered the shipyard and made their way around to the ships, boarding those they were assigned to. We don't have enough crew for the battleships, Your Grace, Priest Hoffman announced. We can reassign some engineers from the cruisers, and it will make them a bare minimum. Do it. If it's not enough, abandon one of the frigates and reassign personnel. The battleship takes priority over the others. There was some furore as the control center sought for and assigned available crew from the other ships. Bishop Zalil didn't like this,
as every delay increased the chance of failure.
"We found enough personnel, Your Grace. It's enough to get the battleship going, but they might struggle to cope in extenuating circumstances. As long as we can get them back to secure space, that will be sufficient," Zalil acknowledged.
Orders were given, and the Aleph ships started to depart from their moorings. Once all were away, they formed up with the UCH fleet.
"Destroy the shipyard. Let nothing remain that might give away our presence," Priest Hoffman commanded. "Use nuclear missiles. They'll create enough mess and radiation to help cover our tracks."
The fleet turned toward the exit vector and launched a brace of nuclear weaponry at the remains of the shipyard. There was a series of massive explosions that shredded much of what was left, creating a zone of debris. With so much reduced to so many small fragments, it would be difficult, if not impossible, to do a forensic breakdown of the attack, and the radiation just added to the pollution.
"Our objective has been achieved. Let us return to the safety of church space."
Chapter 8. The Cadir fleet, or at least one of them, was located in the Namaste system. The Vanguard frigate was lucky that the fleet had not been on the gate, but on the exit gate leading to the next system, Torwin. The frigate was there long enough to see the Cadir fleet jump through. The spearhead battle group jumped in and joined the frigate on the Torwin gate, waiting for the main fleet to catch up. They eventually jumped into Namaste and started heading towards the Torwin gate. Emerging from the slide, the task force started to gather once more, with the outlying frigates and cruisers making their way back to them.
"Status."
"No change. We cannot currently confirm if the Cadir fleet is in the next system still, but there have been no new sightings or reports of any attacks."
"Traveling at full speed. How far could they have progressed?"
"Only to the next system, Rockham."
"There's a colony there, is there not?"
"Yes, sir. Rockham Vendette," Hannah confirmed. "Food production colony, population around 80 million.
"We have to keep them away from that colony," Schaefer determined. "Captain Lassiter, are the crew of the Petrov ready to jump?" "Yes, sir." "If the Cadir are on the other side of this gate, slide out immediately. If they attack you, we will jump and engage. If they do not, we will jump in and issue our ultimatum. If they are not on the gate, try and locate them," Schaefer issued. "If they're not in the system, slide to the Rockham gate and hold."
"Good luck, Petrov,"
Voight added.
"Thank you, Liberator. Jumping now." "Set the fleet to DEFCON 2, Schaefer advised.
"Implementing,"
Hannah responded. There was a tense moment as the HDR Petrov exited the system. The seconds passed slowly, the fleet holding its collective breath.
"Thorough inside of the gate is clear," Captain Lassiter reported. "Good. Any trace of the Cadir?" "We've just pinged the Rockham gate, and we're just receiving data that it has recently been used. Long-range scan indicates Cadir fleet has arrived on that gate," Captain Lassiter added. "Looks like the second fleet has nearly caught the first." "Fleet jump into Torwin," Schaefer ordered. "Captain Lassiter, prepare for slide to Rockham gate, but only initiate when the Cadir jump out."
There was the shudder that racked the ship as they jumped, the fleet passing from Namaste to Torwin, almost instantaneously. When they reappeared, the Petrov was still present.
"Initiate comms with the Cadir fleet."
"Sir, the Rockham gate is registering activation. They're leaving the system."
"Fleet, slide to the Rockham gate."
"If we jump, it's possible we could be jumping into an engagement."
"More than likely," Schaefer echoed. "Hannah, when we arrive in Rockham and the Cadir fleet is still on the gate, try and group up the fleet. As we discussed before, one battleship covering each of our flanks, the rest of the fleet distributed around them. If we get too spread out, we won't be able to support each other as effectively."
"I'll inform the fleet."
"Lieutenant Maritzu, open the comms with the Cadir as soon as we jump through," Schaefer added. "They'll probably refuse a handshake, so if the first attempt fails, go to an open broadcast."
"Yes, sir."
"Kane, how quickly can you identify which ships belong to which fleet?"
"It could take a few seconds. I'll have to identify all Cadir idents and remove all familiar idents, and that should give us a count of the unfamiliar Cadir idents," Kane explained. "I will identify the fleet that has the larger number of ships and greater firepower."
"Logic would suggest it's the fleet doing the chasing,"
Voight observed.
"But is the Holy Empire doing the chasing, or this new faction?"
The fleet started to emerge from the slide on the Rockham Gate. There was no trace of the Cadir fleet. Every last ship now in the Rockham system.
Captain Lassiter, ready to jump again? Yes, sir. Same drill as last time. If they're on the gate, get out of there. Jumping. Move the fleet to DEFCON 1.
There was another pause of another few seconds, but this time the response was quicker.
They're on the gate, sliding out. Lassiter.
There was a pause of another few seconds. They could see the stream from the ship, and despite some frantic actions, it was still visible, which was a positive.
We're out. Both KD fleets on the gate and engaged. Can you get eyes on without putting yourself at risk? We will slide back to extreme range. If possible, try and do a sweep of all ship idents and feed it back to us. Sliding back now.
There was another pause. Schaefer stared at the stream from the HDR Petrov, watching as Captain Lassiter and his crew carried out their tasks. The stream continued unabated, and there was nothing to suggest extreme stress, so all was looking reasonably safe. For now.
Collating ship idents now, Lassiter stated. There's one hell of a ruckus going on at the gate. Any side dominating. Looks about even at the moment, but it's hard to tell. Until we get those idents, they all look the same.
Captain, I have received the ident data from the Petrov, and am now calculating, Kane informed.
Good work, Lassiter. Keep us informed.
Schaefer waited for Kane's analysis. Better they identify the ships before they jump so they could implement their strategy before the engagement. And there would be an engagement. The Cadir saw humanity as lesser beings. They weren't going to respond well to an order to vacate Republic space. The best they could hope for is they would be distracted by their current battle and prioritize that over engaging them. Captain, there are 38 Holy Empire ships and 29 of the state ships. 67 in total, Kane announced. Composition is roughly similar to ours, but the greater number of ships puts us at a disadvantage. Only if they fight together, Voight pointed out. While they are fighting each other, we have the advantage.
Commander, whilst common sense would suggest that this is the Cadir we're talking about, their hate for us may well outweigh their hate for each other, Schaefer reminded. Prepare for the worst.
Yes, sir.
Hannah, how do the figures plug into your simulation?
Running the projections now, sir, Hannah anticipated. Current estimates predict a costly win.
Expected losses?
Around a third of the fleet. Heavy damage to the rest.
Is that with the KD united?
Yes.
And what if they remain divided?
I'll run a simultaneous projection.
Lieutenant Maurizio, put out a call to Republic Command. Let's get as many ships as we can. Even a few ships could help more of the fleet survive a confrontation.
Projections showing a loss of around 12 to 14 ships with a divided Cadir fleet, Hannah interrupted. Only a few iterations run, though, so it's a very rough projection.
Flight Commander Sokolov, are the fighters prepped? All fighters are prepped and ready to launch. Fleet, prepare for the jump. We will try negotiation first, but I fully expect this to fail. If they fire upon you, do not hesitate to defend yourselves, Schaefer commanded. Follow targets as they are called, but notify us if you're the target of focus fire and we'll switch targets.
Sir, Republic Command states ships are being reassigned to this theater. 16 ships are inbound, including 3 battleships, but the nearest is a minimum of 36 minutes away.
That'll be good enough. Keep Republic Command informed, Lieutenant. Battle might be over before they get here.
Schaefer returned his attention to the fleet.
Let's maintain fleet discipline and remember that there are 80 million civilians on Rock and Vendette. Good fortune to you all, Schaefer announced. Fleet, jump.
And with that, 49 ships jumped into a conflict arena. As they emerged from the conduit, the gate on the Rockham side was ablaze with destruction. Cadir ships were firing on each other with scant regard for their new arrivals. There appeared to be some focused targeting going on, but it was descending into a more chaotic affair, with individual skirmishes breaking out away from fleet discipline. The task force had emerged scattered around the gate, a little distance from the conflict, but still perilously close. Their formation was random at the moment and needed to be rectified.
Hannah!
On it, sir, Hannah replied, starting to organize the fleet, bringing them closer together. The strategic display activated. projecting a holographic representation into the clear space in the middle of the command center. Voight walked up to it and started assessing the operational theater. Lieutenant Maritzu, the Cadir are not responding to any communication handshakes. Switching to general broadcast, Maritzu responded. Open now.
Cadir Fleet, you are in Republic space in contravention of territorial accords. You are advised to head to Cadir territorial space immediately, Schaefer demanded. Whatever your conflict is over, it is not to be fought in Republic space. Now cease fire and separate away from each other.
The carnage continued without interruption, the Cadir ignoring the demand.
Sir, HDR Lexington is taking fire. Is the aggressor Holy Empire or State?
Holy Empire.
Good. Fleet, focus fire on targeted ship, Schaefer ordered. Kane.
Kane selected the aggressor from the cloud and fed data to the AIs throughout the fleet. All the ships in the fleet were now simultaneously targeting the same ship. Firing started with the Cadir ship unable to stand up to sustained firepower. It disintegrated in moments, spilling its crew into space.
Cadir Fleet, last warning. Vacate Republic territory now, or we will use lethal force.
HDR Rourke is under fire. Now the Birmingham and the Herschel, Hannah informed. The whole fleet's coming under attack, from both Holy Empire and State ships.
Knew they wouldn't listen, Schaefer confided in Voight. Kane, there are 2 known countermeasure ships I can see. Target the Holy Empire one. Then select the closest Holy Empire battleship as a secondary.
Schaefer gestured to Voight, and she started analyzing the enemy targets, prioritizing them as best she could ascertain in the circumstances.
Fleet, focus fire on the primary. Switch to secondary upon destruction, Schaefer ordered. Commander, any idea which ship is the flagship of that fleet?
No, sir. Tertiary target should be this battleship. Center of their fleet and outputting a lot of damage. Good candidate.
Tertiary target selected, Kane confirmed. Enemy countermeasure ship down.
Schaefer knew the countermeasure ship wouldn't last long. No matter their species, it was a common trait that they were the weakest ships. But they also had the greatest chance of causing significant disruption, so they were always the primary target.
Fleet, battleship is new primary, Schaefer advised. Take it down.
The battleship was a different target altogether now. Built for frontline offense, it was heavily armed and heavily armored. HDR Rourke under heavy fire. We cannot sustain this level of damage for long. Coming close to us, Rourke. We'll shield you, Voight answered. Sokolov, launch fighters and protect the Rourke.
Copy, Commander. Are the opposing fleet taking the bait?
Schaefer asked Voight. Looks like they're fighting both them and us.
Typical,
Schaefer derided.
Still, their attention's divided.
Rourke is down, Hannah updated. Damn, Voight cursed. Fighter group, defensive perimeters around the Liberator. The sustained firepower from the Cadir battleship proved to be too much, and the ship broke apart into several fragments, drifting away from each other.
Captain, detecting breach shuttles incoming, Denham yelled.
The Cadir had elected to cause disruption upon the Liberator. This made sense, as it was obviously the command ship, and any disruption they could cause would impede the whole fleet. The one problem the Cadir had was the sheer size of the ship. They wouldn't be able to make it to the command center easily, being located at the core of the ship. But there were other potential targets.
Doctor, inform Major Varma. Direct his soldiers to where the breach shuttles land, Schaefer decided. Fleet, select new primary target.
HDR Defoe under heavy fire, Hannah advised. Voight analyzed the strategic display. She instantly picked out 3 Cadir battlecruisers that were pummeling the Defoe. Switch target to these. They're state ships, but the ruse wasn't working, she admitted.
Agreed. Fleet, new targets, fire at will.
If they lost the Defoe, there was a crucial amount of their firepower gone. They had to protect it. The Defoe drew closer to the Liberator, and the Ocasio-Cortez moved around to cover the ravaged battleship. The 3 Cadir battlecruisers remained in a tight formation and started swerving away, as they came under sustained attack, pulling away to try and draw the fleet apart.
Switch target back to the battleship. Do not pursue the battlecruisers. They're trying to pull you away from the fleet.
An old tactic, splint the fleet and try and isolate ships, made them easy targets. Captain Norris, how is the Defoe? Voight checked.
Damaged, but still fully operational. Most of the damage is on the ventral side, so we're exposed there.
Exchange places with the Avenger. Keep the ventral side facing the Liberator, Voight assigned. Schaefer nodded his approval at Voight. It was wise to make the swap. Keep the vulnerable side hidden and expose the toughest side to the enemy. Move the Hartman, Corinthian, Kemble and Portland across the dorsal flank to the rear of the fleet. The Cadir seem to be targeting them repeatedly. Bring the Wellington and Alacrity forward to replace them, Voight noted. Yes, sir, Hannah acknowledged, visibly stressed with the sheer volume of traffic she was dealing with. The second enemy battleship disintegrated under fire. Part of the structure repelled as such force had collided with a nearby ship, damaging that as well. Captain Shin, HDR Zyman. We've lost our entire offensive capability, so we're sliding out. Understood. Captain Devart, HDR Shackleton, we're being primaried. It seemed the Cadir were starting to reform into a more unified fighting force again, operating as a whole rather than as separate teams. Pull back, Shackleton. Get behind the Intrepid. Alacrity move to replace the Shackleton. It was going to be close. The Shackleton was being beaten hard, but it may well have the armor to withstand the formation change. By placing their ships between the fire and the Shackleton, the intention was to shield it from further damage. It's no good, Liberator. We're taking too much damage. Understood. Slide out, Shackleton. Assess the situation and come back if you're able to. It was close, but the Shackleton just managed to slide out before it was critically damaged. If the Cadir had any interdiction capability remaining, they were not using it. One of the countermeasure ships had been destroyed, but another remained. They could be holding back for a more strategically useful moment. If they activated it now, the ship generating the field would become the priority target, so it made sense for it to remain quiet and preserve the capability. It wasn't just what weapons you had in your arsenal, but when you used them. Breaching shuttles, making contact now, sir. Doctor, Major Varma is on his way. This was a new phase of the conflict. It had been brutal and violent so far, lives being lost on both sides. But this was where combatants faced each other directly, where it could get especially brutal. Major Varma had the unenviable task of preventing the Cadir troops from getting anywhere near critical infrastructure, including the command center. If they succeeded, it could tip the balance in the favor of the Cadir. Chapter 9. At first, the medical center was quiet. Akari silenced the alarms as soon as they were activated. The flashing lights were enough, no need for the cacophony. She needed to communicate with the staff more than she needed a constant reminder of warfare. It didn't take long for the first casualty to arrive. One technician, carried by another, was bleeding from a head wound and with a burn across the side of his face. It looked nasty, but easily treatable. The real challenge was incoming. The casualties would quickly mount up and overwhelm her staff. It wasn't that she lacked staff, far from it. She had a large number of doctors, paramedics, and nurses at her disposal. It was just the universe's capacity for violence always seemed to exceed its capacity to care for the wounded. True to form, more people started to arrive. Blunt trauma, radiation burns, broken limbs, the whole index of injury was to be found. She'd been involved in incidents where multiple violent injuries were brought before her. Disaster relief, major accidents, criminal incidents. She may have been a researcher primarily, but she'd seen enough action over time. Even so, this was her first real experience of combat triage on a large scale, and the stress was crushing. Some of those who came before her were so badly wounded, she knew there was little chance of saving them. But what could she do? She and her staff had to try anyway. Seeing them flatline, then discarding them as a failure in order to move on to the next one was soul-crushing. The medical center was a processing line, trading in meat. She had just assigned a burns victim to one of the doctors when Namor Sken came running into the medical center. "Doctor, are you okay?" Sken asked. "What are you doing here?" Akari challenged, visibly weeping. "This is not the time, unless you're injured. Get out and leave me to get on with my work." "I'm here to help, Doctor," Sken rebutted. "I'm not allowed in any of the core military areas, but I can help here. I have paramedic training and field dressing experience." Akari stopped for a moment and stared at Namor Sken. This was an enemy of the state, a ruthless assassin who killed without compunction and performed atrocity without ever questioning the morality of his actions. And yet, he had been nothing but truthful with her. He had even been appreciative of her treatment and shown her respect. It was hard for her to reconcile his manner with his reputation. Combined with the massive demand for medical attention, she felt that there was only one real recourse.
Okay, help Massey and Elsmore over there, Akari accepted. But you hurt one person and you're out of here.
I promise, Sken responded earnestly. He rushed over to the two paramedics who were clearly unnerved by his presence, but they soon overcame their concerns in order to attend to the incoming casualties. Akari continued her work, occasionally looking up from the gore to check up on Sken. He tended to the wounded, true to his word, using his limited medical skills to the best effect. He operated efficiently, though his bedside manner was non-existent, patching the wounds and discarding them with no thought to their emotional state. Not that she could be absolved of such criticism herself. She knew she could be a bit tactless at times. Still, Sken's lack of emotional awareness was on another level. The way he operated, it was like fixing a machine. Despite her reservations, his assistance was helping save lives. She had just finished with a patient when she became aware of screaming from outside the medical center. It was hard to discern at first, given the caterwauling within the medical center, but as it drew closer, it became clearer. Gunfire entered the audio mix, and it soon became clear what was happening. They're on board, Sken noted. This thought terrified Akari. If they got into the medical center, they would kill all the vulnerable patients. She couldn't leave those in her care, nor could she fight to protect them.
We can't evacuate, she cried.
Tend to the patients, Doctor. Do what you do, Sken soothed. I'll do what I do. Sken grabbed a handgun from an injured security guard. Akari hadn't even noticed it, but it seems Sken had been aware as soon as it came within his sensory reach. Another less injured security guard realized what was happening and got to his feet, encouraged by Sken's actions. One of the nurses tried to prevent him, but he made his way forward, knowing his duty. He unsheathed his handgun and nodded to Sken. Seen combat before? Sken asked.
Police action, not military, he responded.
Don't hesitate and show no mercy, Sken advised. You think about it, you're dead. The gunfire was getting much closer now. Someone ran into the medical center holding her side, obviously shot. Keep inside. Out in the corridor, we're too exposed. If we remain in here, we're getting them to come into a bottleneck. That favors us.
Puts the patients at risk.
Puts them more at risk if we die out there, Sken reasoned. Hold your nerve and kill them quick. The corridor opposite the entrance was empty, save for two people who wisely halted and headed back in the opposite direction. Projectiles blazed by the entrance as the invaders targeted someone out of the line of sight. From the audio rattle, they were very close now. The smell was the first aspect of the Cadir that they noticed. That aroma of mildew that they exuded was so strong it almost forced a gag reflex. It then came into view, half walking, half skating on four stubby legs that dripped with mucus. Its body was pyramidal in shape from the bottom up, merging into a more familiar mollusk shape towards the top. 4 limbs projected from its upper body. They were prehensile in nature and each ended in 3 grasping nodules. 2 of them were holding onto its weapon. One looked organic in nature and nothing like an assault rifle or any other weapon a human would use. It operated in a similar manner, though, spewing forth manufactured projectiles. The head was curved and contained several stalks, some which operated as eyes and some as other sensory apparatus. The mouth was a horror, an orifice with what looked like a rasping tongue, all spikes and bladed edges. Much of the body was armored, organic shells partly covering their front and back. It wasn't total coverage, as the species had lost it over time in order to grant them better agility. It glistened, much like a snail, but it moved at a much faster pace. Not as fast as a human, but still much faster than a mollusk. Not that it was one, but there were many similarities. The Cadir moved its head around and spotted the occupants of the medical center. Before it could react, the body flopped down to one side, but it did not fall, the base structure of it being too stable to topple, even in death. This did provide some advantage for them, as the body was now a blockage for the following Cadir. The next Cadir slid around the back of the corpse, using its brethren as a shield and preventing Sken, or the guard, being able to target it in time. One Cadir poked a stalk around the frame of the entrance. The guard took aim and blasted the stalk, partially blinding the Cadir. "Good shot," Sken commended. There was a hissing coming from outside as the injured Cadir screamed. A prehensile arm coiled around the corner, holding something that looked tubular and had some kind of release mechanism at one end. Sken recognized it for what it was immediately and shot at the Cadir without hesitation. He hit the grenade and it exploded in the doorway. Some of the blast came through the entrance. With him being closest to it, the blast bowled Sken over and out of cover, rolling onto his back. The explosion wasn't that strong, and most of it had been outside. Undoubtedly, the grenade was designed more for disorientation than damage, intended for breaching. Even so, it took Sken a few seconds to shake the effects. One of them came through the door, now missing an arm, and tried to stamp on his head as he lay prone. Revolted at the sight of a mucus-slathered limb bearing down on him, he rolled away, dodging it marginally. For a moment, he was grateful evolution didn't see fit to make the Cadir faster. The guard shot the Cadir in the upper body, wounding it but not killing it. Sken brought his gun up and shot upwards, finishing the job. Getting to his feet, Sken noted the blade attached to the Cadir's back shell and retrieved it. The blade itself was flat and sharp, although unusual in that it was broader at the end than it was at the hilt. The handle, however, was radically different, being curved and ridged, designed for the peculiar grasping limb of the Cadir. Nonetheless, he was able to wield the weapon, though he loathed the sticky residue it carried. More Cadir now poured through the entrance, no longer stunned by the explosion. The guard started firing, carefully selecting his targets, trying to pick the ones closest. Sken immediately whisked the blade up. He was too close to them to use a firearm effectively, but the blade was perfect. The first stroke took off 2 arms of one Cadir, and the second stroke went. Akari, cowering beside a triage cot, watched the close-range combat unfold. The liquid grace Sken moved with was as beautiful as it was savage. This was what he was created to do, and it terrified her. Another Cadir got a round off, but Sken had moved around and yet another Cadir tried to match him with his own sword, and the blades clashed with a dull metal thud. Sken responded faster by spinning backwards and ducking. The Cadir blade passed over him, whilst his own bit into the lower part of its body. The spinning movement had moved Sken away from the Cadir, and now he was at enough of a distance that he could use the gun freely again. He started to fire, taking out as many of the Cadir as possible, moving swiftly through them. The guard provided covering fire from a different angle. The guard's aim was good, and he was firing with trained speed, heeding the advice he'd been given. Yet Sken managed to outpace him, selecting and executing his targets with such alacrity it seemed to stagger the Cadir. More gunfire could be heard outside, but this time the sound was more familiar. Those were Republic assault rifles. The Cadir outside started to retreat, and those inside their entrance were cut off. One of the few remaining creatures started firing. Several people were hit, and Sken caught a bullet himself, striking him in the stomach. The guard was able to shoot at it a number of times, the last shot disabling its arm on one side. Sken shot the last able-bodied Cadir and moved to the now injured last remaining Xeno. Leaning to one side, it looked at Sken and the blade it carried. It knew what was coming, and didn't say anything. It just looked its executor in the eye and hissed its hate at him. Sken started. He stopped only when the creature expired, strewn across the medical center's floor. Only a few seconds had expired, but they had been an ample demonstration of Sken's lethality. Having seen him in action, Akari was now more scared of him than ever. The execution of the final disabled Cadir was the one that disturbed her the most. It had been unarmed and gravely wounded, no threat to him, yet he butchered it without any remorse. Soldiers passed by outside and pressed on against the intruders. Major Varma was directing them before handing over to a subordinate. He entered and scrutinized the area closely. "There any left in here?" "They're all dead." "Did you do all this?" he asked Sken.
Not alone, Sken added, indicating the guard. You want to give me the gun? Varma asked warily. Sken, rather reluctantly, handed the weapon to Varma. And the sword. Again, Sken handed it over without a word. Now come with me. Major, he did just save us. That may be so, Doctor, but seeing this and knowing his reputation, you'll forgive me for a little caution. It's okay, Doctor. Trust isn't won with a single action, I know. Sken forgave. Not with my history. Sken then turned to the guard, who was shaking uncontrollably. And thanks for covering my back. Major Varma led Sken out of the room, leaving the detritus of his slaughtered behind. Akari sighed with a judder. The last few minutes had been the most terrifying of her life, and she didn't know what had terrified her more. The religious, zealot Xenos out to murder them all, or her guardian angel who saved them. Chapter 10. The Banshee's engines hummed gently, reflecting the pilot's anticipation. Nikolai Sokolov sat patiently, awaiting the order. This was the part he loathed, caught between the preparation for battle and the battle itself. It was these moments that allowed doubt to creep in, for one's own mortality to encroach upon their duty. A pilot could feel more terrified in these moments than in the battle itself. It was in these moments that they could contemplate the likelihood of their own impending doom. A fighter pilot's life was an inherently fragile one where it only took one hit to kill you. The ships they flew were remarkably well put together, brimming with power and weapon systems, but their size made them weak to damage of any kind. The fighter's primary defense was evasion. If Nikolai was honest, he often felt such intense fear in these moments, he would pray for the battle to be joined just so he could escape the overwhelming dread. Better to be fighting the enemy than your own despair. They all sat listening to the unfolding battle, waiting patiently in the rapid fighter release corridors. They could see the void ahead of them, only the coupling behind the ship holding them from it. Vacuum surrounded the ship, indicating they were outside it, even if they were within the confines of the superstructure. The hangar was several levels above them, but they couldn't launch everyone from there simultaneously as proximity was an issue. The rapid fighter release corridors existed for this kind of mass deployment. Sokolov launched fighters to protect the Rourke. Copy, Commander, Sokolov responded, grateful for the interruption to his pondering of mortality. Alpha Wing release! The complement of fighters poured from the Liberator and swarming towards the Rourke. Let's see if we can intercept any of the incoming fire, Sokolov ordered. This was the reason they were piloting the Banshees and not the Spectre fighters. The latter was a superb ship for skirmishing with other fighter groups, but the Banshee was designed for fleet defense. The targeting systems were much more advanced, enabling them to track missiles and other projectiles with great precision. The faster the projectile, the less likely the chance for intercepting it, so success depended on what the incoming fire was composed of. Missiles were slow in comparison, so they stood a better chance, whereas railgun projectiles were beyond difficult. Where the fighters excelled in point defense was their agility. They could get to the incoming fire and take it down away from the ship, whereas the larger ships were restricted by their mass and range. Head towards the rock and work your way back along the trajectory. Try and close in on the egresses. Destroy the incoming fire as soon as possible. Sir, there's not much left of the Rourke. They were right. Sokolov brought up the external stream of the Rourke. They were still some distance away, but he could see already they were too late. The Rourke was venting badly and trailing wreckage. The port side of the ship was devastated. Around a third of the ship blasted away from the main hull. There were small objects drifting around the scarring, and it did not take long for them to realize they were the corpses of the crew. The incoming fire was still hitting the Rourke, even though it was no longer a threat, the Cadir wanting to ensure the ship could not escape. The ship suddenly detonated as a critical hit was made to an integral system. For an explosion like that, it had to be the power systems. The flash was bright, but the reactive nature of the display prevented any of the pilots from being blinded. There was no shockwave, for there was no medium for it to travel through, but there was a surfeit of debris heading their way. Watch for debris, Sokolov warned. You're hit, you're dead. It was a stock reminder,
and needed to be reiterated in these circumstances. A little bit of shrapnel could cause catastrophic damage.
"Rourke is down," Hannah updated.
"Fighter group, defensive perimeter around the Liberator."
"You heard the commander. Perimeter watch. Identify, isolate, and intercept."
Their duty was now to defend the Liberator. Being such a large target and the obvious candidate for the command ship, it made sense for it to be the prime target. It didn't look like it was this case in the battle, though. Whatever the reasoning for the Cadir's target calling, it still made sense to anchor around the Liberator. It was the center of the fleet, making it much easier to reach any other ship.
"Alpha Wing, defend HDR Defoe," Hannah allocated priorities.
"On our way." The Defoe was a large battleship and capable of staying alive for longer. "Take out what you can and stay clear of the fleet's target trajectory." There were so many projectiles and missiles inbound that it made little sense to coordinate their defense, as the group acting autonomously could intercept more. As they were engaged shooting down projectiles, one of the Banshees just disappeared from the wing. An alert sounded to indicate the status change. "Who just got vaped?"
"Edmonds."
Sokolov glanced at the wing composition, which confirmed the loss. Edmonds, there 1 second, gone the next. Not even an indication of what destroyed her.
"Alpha Wing, please be advised. Incoming Cadir interceptors have been detected."
"Acknowledged." Interceptors meant they were tasked with their destruction. They were specifically designed for anti-fighter roles. "Beta Wing, release," Sokolov announced. "Try and get your team on those interceptors."
"We're inbound, sir."
The Beta Wings were in the Spectres. They were standing by in case of this eventuality, and were in the more agile fighters. Not that Banshees were bad for anti-fighter warfare, as it was a multi-role fighter, but the Spectre was a specialist interceptor, and just that little more agile. The Alpha Wing continued to perform their task, strafing across the firing arc and taking out what they could. Sokolov fired the thrusters to swing his ship around, fired the main engines to alter his momentum in a new direction, then swinging his ship around to face the firing arc of the large ships so he could face all his weapon systems into it. Sokolov could see the Defoe was moving to a safer position where it was protected by other ships and had its damaged areas shielded by the Liberator. Some of the smaller ships were being attacked, but no concentration of firepower emerged until the Shackleton came under attack.
"Alpha Wing moved to protect the Shackleton."
His wing changed their focus, now moving towards the battle cruiser. Within seconds, it was starting to move position in the formation as one ship moved to replace it.
"Cadir interceptors on our backs," one of the fighters called out.
"Dryden, where are you?"
5 seconds out."
Sokolov made a decision. With the interceptors behind them and the Banshees heading directly towards the Shackleton, they would be easy targets. "Hamel, Coop, 180 and engage the interceptors with me. Rest of you protect the Shackleton." Sokolov, Hamel, and Coop all flipped their ships to face backwards, their momentum carrying them towards the Shackleton still. They started to use their thrusters to jink whilst travelling in reverse. This was a tricky position to fight from, but shifting momentum in the opposite direction took time and effort, time that could be better spent. Besides, with the Beta Wing inbound, they could revert and still conserve their momentum once they arrived. This was all about laying down some interference with those seconds in between. "Select random targets, break up their formation a little. Disruption over destruction." Hamel and Coop both acknowledged, and the three of them started firing at the Cadir interceptors, all the while bobbing up and down, side to side as they hurtled backwards. The fire did what it was intended to. Rushing headlong into it, the Cadir had to bank. 2 of them were obliterated immediately as they started to change direction. Hamel got 2 more as several strayed directly into his line of sight. "Nice shooting, Hamel. Better for you after," Sokolov congratulated. As the Cadir interceptors tried to re-establish their targets, Beta Wing swooped in, annihilating a few more in the process. The dogfight had begun in earnest, allowing Alpha Wing to proceed with their purpose. "Thanks for taking over, Drayton." Reverting their ships, they moved into a trajectory better suited for anticipating the incoming projectiles travelling towards the Shackleton. As Beta Wing destroyed the interceptors, Alpha Wing utilized everything at their disposal to mitigate the flak. Despite their best efforts, they were only responsible for negating a small percentage, but even this small percentage could save a ship, and by extension, a fleet. They were a small cog in the larger fighting machine, but they were still an important one. Drones were useful, but when the technology level of the opposing fleet was the same, they usually just ended up cancelling each other out. with superior numbers being the usual winning factor. Pilots still offer the edge of intuition and creativity. The Shackletons started to slide out, having taken significant damage. Alpha Wing's contribution could have been enough to save the ship and her crew. He took pride in that. A pilot's existence was a risky one, but considering he contributed to saving thousands of lives, it was a rewarding one.
"So we could do with some help," Drayden announced. "We're being outnumbered here." "Liberator Alpha Wing moving to assist Beta Wing."
With no hesitation, they converged and headed back towards the Spectres. The Cadir interceptors were swarming Drayden's team, using their superior numbers to overwhelm them. Some of them had been destroyed already, and they were in serious danger.
"Okay, engage at will, call for support if required."
The initial volley took out a number of Cadir who had clumped together before all the Banshees peeled out of formation. Sokolov could see one Spectre being hounded by 3 Cadir and took off after it. He eliminated 2 of them before they realized he was there, and the third one started to maneuver randomly in an attempt to shake him. Sokolov tried to predict where he was going to move yet, laying down fire ahead of him, but he was an invasive individual, rolling and yawing effectively. Still, it got him off his target and gave his wingman some room.
"Danke, sir." "No problem, Callan. Pay it forward," Sokolov responded.
This was chaos, but expected. Fleet defense often ended up in a brawl as one fleet moved to counteract the other. In a weird way, it was a compliment, as it meant the enemy saw them as a threat, and if they were a threat, they were accomplishing what they set out to do. He flew erratically, searching for a new target, but not wanting to remain static and become one. Another Spectre was being hounded by a number of Cadir interceptors, and he chased after them. The Spectre pilot was doing well, pushing the capabilities of the ship as far as they could. Sokolov couldn't quite match that agility, but the Cadir interceptors could. Still, he didn't need to be, as he was hunting them. Proximity alerts started sounding, and then he realized he'd picked up a tail. One Cadir interceptor at the moment, but there will be more. He managed to pick off one of the interceptors following the Spectre, and then he turned to face his foe. 3 interceptors were now converging on him, all from different trajectories. He trained his reticule on the first as he hurtled backwards away from it. The interceptor was moving wildly and closing in fast, but he held his nerve, firing in short bursts ahead of the predicted movements. It took 5 bursts, but he eventually predicted correctly and took him out. But the other 2 were getting close. The second interceptor exploded as a wing member vaporized it, and the third was damaged by a separate teammate.
"Shan, Kublev, drinks for you later," Sokolov commended.
Mere seconds after he finished his sentence, Kublev vanished from existence, his Spectre taken out by the very interceptor that had been tailing him, one of the group Sokolov had been trying to rid him of just seconds previously. Sokolov cursed himself. He'd lost a good pilot thanks to his own inability to deal with the enemy quickly enough. That will haunt him, like all the people who had died under his command. He could tell himself that that was the nature of their role, but it never helped. They were his responsibility, and their deaths were his failure. He couldn't brood, though. Combat wouldn't let him. He would have to be mourned later. For the moment, he had to fight and adhere to his mantra. "You're hit, you're dead." Chapter 11. This was the first taste of battle for Carter Vincent. He knew it was coming at some point, and he had accepted the risk. But now it had become real. He'd been working on potential avenues of diplomacy with the Cadir, along with several other members of the diplomatic staff, but as soon as the alert got upgraded to DEFCON 1, he knew it was all going to be bad. Still, by going what he had been researching recently, it was inevitable. Everything they had on the Cadir painted a rather bleak picture. There wasn't much, and it was all bad. Humanity's encounters with them had almost always ended in conflict. The only bright spot in the case history was the fact that the Cadir were one of the species on a similar technology level to humanity. If they had been on the same level as the Iryans or Ven Hydran, humanity wouldn't have stood a chance against them and would be reliant on the protection of the Iryans. There was an explosion nearby as the Liberator took a hit. It was against the shield, that floating swarm of armored drones. Carter had no idea how many drones that would have taken out, but it would have diminished the overall strength of the shield. They were located near the outer edge of the hull, with the wall displaying the view outside, so the flash of the explosion was easily noticeable. There was no impact felt, though, which is what made Carter assume the shield had absorbed it. There has been damage to the shield in this section. If you are not engaged in defensive duties, you are advised to make your way to the emergency sections in the core of the ship, Kane advised. Yeah, I got that, Carter remarked. Catcher, we gotta move. His colleague, Catcher Nenham, reacted with shock. She'd been lost in her work, and the sudden reminder of context had woken her with a start. What, Jenna, Cleo, let's get moving. Carter wasn't even thinking, reacting instinctively. Otherwise, he wouldn't have referred to Cleo Alexander by her first name, but by her ambassadorial rank. Not that there were any complaints. Kane's warnings were stark enough reminder of the jeopardy. He hurried them out of the office and entered the neighboring office, where additional diplomatic staff were based. They were already making their moves towards the exit, and Carter encouraged them, counting them all as he did so. There was one person less than he expected. Where's Juno? One of the leaving staff shrugged their shoulders. The first place that occurred to Carter was the toilet. He'd experienced a fire alarm once at the financial company he used to work at, where he'd been caught in the delicate process of defecation, so it was a familiar possibility to him. He quickly indicated his intent to Cleo and made his way to the toilets nearby and barged his way into the ladies' toilets. One woman squeezed by as he did so. Juno, you in here? A cubicle door swung open, and the person in question tumbled out. I'm coming, she expressed with a red face. The pair of them emerged back into the corridor and started catching up with the others. The ambassador was bringing up the rear, ensuring that no one else was left behind. Thank fortune you found her, Cleo expressed. It's happened to me before. If like this happens, someone is going to be caught out like that. They proceeded in a calm but urgent manner. They had to avoid using the parquam as it was a risk during combat, and no one wanted to get stuck part of the way to safety. The only people allowed to use it were the security and emergency staff, where urgency overrode the risk. They rushed down the corridor that led them down into the ship's interior, where something smashed into the hull not too far away. A bulkhead swiped shut in a moment, blocking them off from their intended exit. Carter screamed. There must have been a breach, Catcher reasoned. Okay, this way, Carter reasoned. He'd recently been given a seemingly endless briefing on all the emergency procedures, and it was all fresh in his mind. He'd derided it and made fun of it during the training, but now he was grateful. He knew where to go by navigating using the discreet but clearly visible color-coded lines on the wall. It was a nice, simple touch that provided just that little bit extra help pathfinding through the behemoth ship. They were dynamic too, altering in an instant. Whereas the most relevant line had pointed in the direction they were headed, it now guided them in the opposite direction. The calm walk had since evaporated as well. The bulkhead closing reaffirmed some urgency, and now the group were running. Carter had taken the lead. He kept checking behind to ensure everyone was keeping up, careful not to lose a single soul. They found the stairwell and started charging down it. He turned around and looked up, Cleo giving him an indication that everyone had made it through. It still seemed strange to him that a spaceship would still need stairs. Still, in a situation where the parquam didn't work, it was a reliable construction. Carter guessed that some things were just universal. No pun intended. They descended 4 floors before heading back into the corridors. The structure opened out a little more at this depth, affording more pathways. The outer segments had been more limited by necessity, being as close to the exterior as they were. This way, he bellowed, leading his team closer to safety. He raced around a corner into a new corridor and ran headfirst into something solid, yet giving. Something warm and sticky. He staggered back and realized he'd run straight into an angry Cadir. This was the first time he'd seen one in the flesh, and it terrified him. It was much bigger in physiology, a few feet taller than himself, but with considerably more bulk, much of its body mass located in its lower half. To Carter, it was a weird mix of snail, pyramid, and some tentacled horror. And the smell was indescribable, having that musky mildew smell that ratcheted up to such a level as to be unbearable. One of the creature's tentacles lashed out, whipping Carter savagely and slamming into the side wall. Those following him came to a halt in stunned fear. Regaining his composure, he stared at the beast with the same repulsion he had for slugs and snails, with the added fear of scale. He tried to think of what he could do. His first thought was flight, or running back where they came from, but the creature was armed. He could just turn the corner and start firing on him. He had to do something now. But what? He'd studied Cadir biology a little, and, little as he knew, one thing did occur to him. Before the creature could react, the Cadir hissed in pain and thrashed around hard, swatting Carter off itself. Carter collapsed on the ground, Cadir grabbing him and helping him to his feet. "Don't just stand there, run!" he roared, spurring the group into action. They all started running to the stairwell. "Down to the next level, head back in this direction," he instructed. They did need to pass this point, but it didn't matter which floor they did it on. He looked back to see another Cadir skate around the corner. It moved in a way that looked surreal. It part-walked using its 4 short legs, but it also glided. It was like it was caught between the way humans walked and the way snails slithered. Reality came crashing back in when the first gunshot streaked past, very close to his leg. The others were entering the stairwell now, and he hoped he could make it before the next burst of gunfire. As he dived into the doorway, another round chewed out some of the structure around him. He was lucky the Cadir missed, but he had been running in a very uncoordinated manner, still stunned from his beating. They ran down the stairs and emerged into the corridor below, taking a momentary breather.
"Carter, are you okay?"
Cleo asked. I think so," Carter stuttered, the adrenaline kicking in. He stared at his hands, coated as they were with at least 3 different types of slimy flesh. He was also spattered with some kind of mucus from his physical contact with the Cadir. "Sweet baby, this is gross," he whined as he attempted to smear the slime on the wall instead of his hands.
"That was some quick thinking, Carter,"
Cleo complimented. "I only went for the eyes because I couldn't remember where the were," he sighed, making light of the recent peril. He could see Cleo didn't quite follow what he meant, but it dawned on her soon enough. The vernacular might be new to her, but the context was not.
"Either way, you saved our lives there."
"Did I?" Carter responded. "I just reacted."
"Yeah, you did,"
Cleo replied.
"Now I suggest we get moving again. They're not as fast as us, and they'll struggle with the stairs, but they'll keep coming."
"Good shout. Let's get going." The group started running again, this time more of a measured jog rather than the frantic dash they had endured. They passed underneath the place Carter had collided with the Cadir. Fortunately, there was no trace of them on this level. Carter heard an explosion above them and started improving his pace, all the while keeping an eye on those that were, once again, behind him. There was a difference, though. Where there had been panic before, there was more composure now. Carter didn't realize it, but the small group were now looking to him for leadership. They just witnessed him take down an armed Cadir with his bare hands and were suitably impressed by his effectiveness. Carter remained blissfully unaware of his achievement, still shaking with the adrenaline, his heart pounding like it was going to explode. The gruesome sludge on his hands was a reminder of what he'd just done, and now it was starting to sink in. He had blinded another living, sapient creature. For that, he suddenly felt great shame. He hadn't even been in a fight since he was in his 20s, and here he was getting into a life-or-death struggle with alien soldiers. They jogged onwards, towards the center, passed down another stairwell and out again before merging with another group of people. They were security personnel and armed, which lent an additional sense of security to the group. Eventually, they reached a checkpoint manned by 2 soldiers. "Head down that way. Emergency sections are signposted," one of the soldiers advised. "Don't wander away from the secure zones. The Cadir have managed to make it onto the ship." "We just ran into them," Carter revealed, holding onto his hands to show the slime. "You lose anyone?" Carter did a quick head count. "No." "You've been lucky then. There's fighting going on in several locations." "How bad is it?" "We don't know yet, sir. Just proceed to the emergency zone and stay there till this is over." Carter knew when he was being dismissed, and so they continued on to their destination. They finally reached Sanctuary in the inner core of the ship. They were safer from hull breaches and exterior damage here, though they would not be safe from catastrophic damage. Even so, from here, they could reach the hangars and would stand a chance of making it off alive, if the worst should happen. Cadir strolled up to Carter and kissed him on the cheek.
"Thank you, Carter."
"Eh? For what?"
"For getting us to safety, you idiot,"
Cleo interjected with wry amusement. "I was just following the training," Carter replied.
Carter, you was the one at the front, Cleo reminded. You led the way. Doesn't make me anything special. I don't believe in heroes. They're an invention of myths and legend, Cleo stated. But people can do heroic things. The reality is, it's often accidental, or we stumble into it, or perhaps just repetition of training. It's never quite how it is in these stories, yet heroic things still occur. I don't care what the reason was. I'm just grateful you reacted in the way you did. Ambassador Cleo Alexander sorted off to tend to her staff. Carter hadn't really thought about it. He'd just been reacting this whole time. Maybe it was as Cleo stated. Maybe it was just down to training. Normal people reacting in a positive way and nothing more. For the first time, he felt a little pride in himself. He imagined his children being impressed with his tale of danger and bravery and giant snailians. He could imagine Jacob staring at him with respect and Elizabeth gasping in awe as he described the monster in detail. Even though it was a pleasing thought, melancholia creeped in as the absence of his children in his life was recalled. He touched his chin as he contemplated this, and then remembered the slimy flesh he just transferred from his hands, and remembered how desperately he needed to clean himself.
Chapter 12. Where are we heading? Sken inquired.
Engineering, Sanjeev responded tersely.
The Cadir are heading there as well.
They're trying to disrupt our operation, so they're heading to certain key sites across the ship. They've tried hitting the command center, the computer core, and a number of support functions, such as life support. Medical, you're well aware of.
Makes sense. Remove the enemy's capability to heal, and you remove their ability to get soldiers back into action, as well as increasing the burden of the injured on them.
Thought you might see it that way, Sanjeev scowled. It's also amoral and totally lacking any sense of honor.
For a soldier, that's a naive point of view.
I know what war is like, Skin. I know civility is an alien concept to it, Sanjeev reminded. Doesn't mean I have to endorse it.
If you impose such limits on yourself, you're always going to be fighting at a disadvantage.
I disagree, Sanjeev responded sharply. Fighting with a code of conduct has more subtle benefits. It builds respect, even in your enemy. It can sway their opinion, demotivate their forces, and even bring them over to your side.
Not seen much of that in my experience.
That's where you and I differ. I've seen it happen a lot, Varma countered. Some of the men and women under my command once fought for the corporations, and they didn't join us because we pay better. Sanjeev noticed a change in Sken's expression that seemed more thoughtful and wondered whether he was considering what he had said. Probably not, but he could hope. The man had spent almost his entire life immersed in the worst aspects of human behavior, performing the sort of covert tasks Varma found distasteful. Could he ever expect him to understand a code of honor? The idealistic part of him hoped so, but the more pragmatic side of him suggested he was a lost cause. They entered the start of the engineering section. It took up a large portion of the ship as power generation was such a critical function, and the technology they used was power-hungry. Much of it was dedicated to fine control, distribution, and regulation. If the Cadir wanted to cause as much disruption as possible, they would be heading towards the more critical systems, like power generation, and the systems feeding the engines and slide drives. They entered the main engineering concourse, which acted as a hub for the different aspects of engineering, each aspect having their own region and with a section in the middle where they could all coordinate together. It was a design intended to encourage cooperative thinking between the various teams. The young engineering lead, Lieutenant Commander Jared Nadiro, rushed up to them, pleased to see a substantial security force arrive. "Thank fortune you're here," Jared gasped. "They're on their way." "Where are they?" "They're in the outer section of engineering at the moment. I've tried funneling them in certain directions by opening and closing bulkheads, but they aren't stupid. They know what I'm trying to do and have adapted." "You had any success?" "I've delayed them a little, but not by much. They're just hacking their way through the closed sections now." "Any delay's a good thing," Varma expressed. "Let's set up an ambush." Varma accessed the central console and projected the local map on the screens above. "They're here," Jared pointed out, "currently trying to circumvent this bulkhead." Varma looked at the corridors ahead of them. They had to be heading towards either the control center or one of the main power generators. The antimatter engine was probably top of that list, as it could have the most devastating impact. What about here? Nice open area for us with plenty of cover, whilst they have to come out of a confined space with a strong door, Varma suggested. Good choice. There are gantries above we can position along, giving us a wider firing arc, Sken agreed. What's this we? Sanjeev corrected. You don't think you're taking part in this? We're in the same situation here. Give me a gun and I can help. You said yourself, trust isn't won with a single action. There's trust, and then there's necessity. I have nothing to gain here by betraying you. The Cadir are a threat to all of us. Varma considered this proposition. Sken couldn't be trusted, but he was right about the situation. They needed to neutralize the current threat first. Okay, the Cadir are the priority, Varma reasoned. I'll give you a gun when we get there. Not before. Sken nodded. It was acceptable that Varma conceded his point. Sanjeev tried to assess where they needed to go in relation to the map. Seeing this, Jared responded. That way, he pointed. You're not coming, Sken asked. I'm a builder, not a fighter, Jared replied, honestly. Sken nodded again. It was an admission that didn't bother him. Few people genuinely were fighters. There were lots of pretenders, but few who were truly talented in violence. Varma led the group towards their destination. It didn't take long to reach the ambush point, but they needed to set themselves up quickly. They needed to be hidden well in order to lure the Cadir in. Those on the ground level found recesses and stations to hide behind. Those on the gantries hid in the side corridors, waiting to emerge and set themselves up. Sken, Varma whistled before tossing him an assault rifle. Thanks. Don't make me regret it, Varma cautioned. Kane, where are the Cadir? They are currently working on breaking through the door before this one. How many? There are 20 of them. 20 isn't enough for a ship this size, Sken commented. If you're serious about accomplishing those objectives, yes, Varma answered. This is more of a distraction, though. If they accomplish their goals, it's a bonus. But they're here to give us one more thing to worry about. They could hear thumping from the other side of the door and knew the Cadir were trying to break through. Everyone went silent as they patiently waited. The noise suggested some physical work being done on the other side. They were probably making some adjustments or deploying some technology in order to isolate the door from Kane so that they could open it easier. There was some metallic groaning and the door slid open. They could see the Cadir clearly, but they didn't want to start the shooting until there was a significant amount of them in the chamber. The first Cadir poked their head through the door, suspicious about the open area. The distinct hissing speech of the Cadir could be heard, though it was not clear enough to get a translation from the Babel. They suspect we're here, Sken observed. A small device was held into the room by the Cadir, causing a big flash, and a sudden cloud of steam was released. The Cadir used steam instead of smoke as both obscured vision, but the steam better suited their need for moisture. Major Varma, the Cadir have started making their way down the stern corridor. 2 have remained behind to guard the door, Kane announced. There was little need for subterfuge now. Their ruse had been detected. Haas, your team should keep the Cadir pinned down. Try to keep them alive if possible. We want them to think they have us diverted, Sanjeev ordered. Varma indicated all the other teams to follow him. They raced sternbound, navigating the corridors in line with what the Cadir were attempting to do. Mr. Nadiro, are you listening? Yes, Major. Don't close any of the doors ahead of the moving Cadir group, Varma requested. We want them to think we haven't realized what they're doing yet. I'll close a few leading away from the area. Nothing they'll notice, just enough to slow down their retreat. Good thinking. Varma, Sken, and the other soldiers emerged into another chamber. This was a smaller space, more of an open office area, but it would suffice. They got there the same time the Cadir were coming through the door, and they had to dive for cover wherever they could find it. The initial exchange killed 2 Cadir and 1 human as they scrambled for some form of cover. This was harder for the Cadir as the ship was not built with their form in mind, so they struggled to find cover large enough to accommodate them. Veach, Malon, suppression, Varma barked. You lads get over there where they're pinned down. Varma pointed to a row of desks. Using them as cover would allow them to open fire on the Cadir flank, giving them a much better chance of hitting them. Varma looked towards Sken, indicating to follow his lead, to which Sken nodded.
Varma, Sken, Veach, and Malon all started firing to force the Cadir into cover and allow the others a few vital seconds to run across some open area to new cover. One of the soldiers was unlucky and caught a burst of gunfire to his upper body, causing him to tumble with the momentum. The swearing and groaning indicated that he was still alive, though seriously wounded. "Take them out!" 2 Cadir were immediately taken out, their slimy bodies perforated. It was at this point that the Cadir seemed to realize they were not going to make it any further, and went on the offense. They abandoned their cover and raced towards them, their weapons blazing. Varma saw 2 more of his soldiers killed with gunfire as the tide shifted. The Cadir were closing in on them fast, aiming to enter melee, where their bulk and multiple appendages gave them an advantage. One of the Cadir blew himself up, taking out itself, another Cadir, and 3 humans. The blast ringing in their ears, Varma realized he had to abandon his assault rifle. He unsheathed his Kanda and gestured to the others. The unspoken command was that he was to try and delay them whilst the others picked them off. Sken took out the closest to Varma, allowing him to emerge and dash toward them. He swiped to his left, gouging the first Cadir through the midriff, partially disemboweling it. He swiftly turned and brought the sword back down across the next one's back, sending it crashing forward. Another Cadir stormed their position, slamming Sken to one side and grabbing Malon with his prehensile limbs, raising him off the ground. Veach turned his gun on the Cadir and blasted it. In return, Veach was shot by another Cadir, forcing her to the ground. The Cadir was almost on top of her when Varma ran it through with his Kanda. This left Varma open to attack from another Cadir, but Sken managed to find his balance in time and riddled it with bullets before it could grab Sanjeev. And with that, the room suddenly became a lot quieter. All the Cadir were now dead, and quite a few of the human soldiers as well. The stench of gunfire, corrupted flesh, and that overpowering mildew filled the room. One of the remaining soldiers vomited as a stress reaction. "Casualties," Varma called. "At least 8 dead," someone answered. There was a horrible rattling sound as someone started breathing again. "Malon's still alive," Veach grimaced. "How is he still alive?" Another soldier cried hysterically. "Elworth, do what you can to stabilize him. We need to get him to medical as soon as." "It'll be more merciful," Sken chimed in, finding the scene gruesome, even with his experience. "I can't see him surviving, but we have to try." "Do you think he wants to?" "I can't speak for him. Leave the triage for the doctors. They'll know whether they can salvage anything of his life." Elworth tended to the unfortunate Malon, doing the best he could to keep him alive. "Haas, sir, the main group of Cadir have been neutralized. Take those guarding the door out, but try and take at least one alive." "Will do." "Kane, any more Cadir on board?" "The 2 Mr. Haas's unit are currently fighting at the last, Major." "Good. We've lost too many already." It was a grim scene. So much death in such a short time. And for what? The fact that they had no idea what the Cadir were even doing in Republic space was the worst part of it. This could have been all for nothing, and it made his blood boil. "I'm going to need that back now," Varma prompted Sken. Sken handed back the assault rifle without comment. "I do appreciate you watching my back there," Varma acknowledged. "That does count for something." Sken nodded and held his stomach. The injury he received in medical was now starting to make itself felt, now that he wasn't so focused on threat management. It had been easy to ignore the pain before, but now it retook prominence. "I need to get this seen to." Chapter 13. "The Kemble is down." Schaefer tried to locate the cruiser on the tactical screen and found its wreck. He was already evaluating how to move the fleet around to plug any potential holes. "Move the Nagoya closer to the Alacrity. They'll have to cover a broader area." "Huang's gone," Hannah updated, referring to a destroyer. The smaller ships had to move around more. Having less in the way of defenses, it was necessary. The formation didn't have to be updated in quite the same way, as their zones of coverage were more fluid than the larger ships. "Fix on the Holy Empire battleship. We take this down, we weaken their fleet significantly,"
Schaefer indicated. It might make them break and run. Hannah relayed the orders to the fleet, and all the ships started to target the battleship. The Cadir battleship put up a strong defense and tried to maneuver out of the way, but it simply wasn't agile enough. The pounding it was taking overwhelmed its defenses. The shield failed as all the drones were destroyed, and the ablative armor was being hammered by so many projectiles it was being stripped bare. The structure was punctured and the atmosphere started to vent. The ship's systems started to fail catastrophically, the ship eventually dying in a sputter. This didn't have the effect Schaefer was hoping for, as the Holy Empire ships continued in conflict. The battle cruiser's next. If they won't leave, we'll destroy them all. The Bennett has been destroyed. 4 ships lost, 2 disabled. Schaefer was keeping a close account of the ship's losses. Every ship lost weakened the fleet as a whole, which made them more vulnerable. Fleet battles were largely about attrition, and if you started to lose more than the enemy, the situation could go from dire to hopeless very quickly. The Defoe is being focused upon again. Can we move our shield around the Defoe? Schaefer queried. We can divert the swarm to help defend the Defoe, but it will leave us vulnerable. Do it. Move it back if we start taking too much damage. It was a risky move to leave themselves reliant on the armor alone, but the projection of the physical shield onto the Defoe could well save it. Cadir battlecruiser down, Voight pointed out. Switch fire to this battlecruiser. Voight selected the appropriate target on the tactical display and broadcasted to the fleet, synchronizing the data between herself and Hannah. Schaefer noted the stream from the Defoe went black. A troubling sign. Sir, Defoe has been disabled. They're in evacuation mode. Damn! Inform the hangars. Get them ready to receive the evac shuttles. The loss of a battleship was a serious reduction in the firepower. He hoped that the majority of the crew were able to escape at least. There were over 10,000 on that ship. Captain, the Holy Empire fleet is disengaging, Voight indicated. Good. Let them run. We've still got the estate Cadir to deal with. Switch targets to this battleship, Hannah called, moving the focus from one fleet to the other. Liberator, this is the Carter. We're having to slide out. We've sustained heavy damage to our offensive capabilities and cannot assist any longer. Acknowledged, Carter. Stay safe. We're losing ships too quickly, Schaefer commented. What's the enemy fleet status? They're in a worse condition than we are, Voight replied. They've lost a lot to the Holy Empire fleet. The Birmingham is taking sustained fire. Bring them in closer. Let's try not to lose any more. Cadir battleship is down. Focus fire on the remaining battleship, Voight ordered. Sir, Cadir fleet is starting to slide out. Both Schaefer and Voight scrutinized the tactical display closely. Hannah was correct. The tags denoting the enemy ships starting to disappear off the theater display. That might have been their command ship. Schaefer grumbled in agreement. The whole battle should never have happened in the first place, but he hoped it was now over. Open communications, Maritzu. Broad spectrum. I want to make sure they hear this. Yes, sir, Maritzu responded. Channels open. Cadir survivors, you have one warning. We will let you leave this system on the condition that you immediately leave Republic space. If you do not, we will hunt you down and destroy every last one of you. There will be no quarter. There will be no mercy, Schaefer demanded. If you ever re-enter Republic space, we will find you and we will destroy you. Schaefer traced his finger across his throat to indicate closing the channels. Petrov, how are your engines? Still intact and fully operational. Good. When the Cadir fleet jumps out of the system, I want you to follow them and make sure they leave Republic space. Keep your distance, but make sure they know they are being watched. Acknowledged, Liberator. Shall I set up a pursuit group, sir? Hannah asked. Set one up, but we'll only chase them if they elect not to leave, Schaefer determined. They're in no fit state to fight us now, and we've got plenty to do saving whatever lives we can. Deploy the ambulances and rescue teams, Voight added. Cadir fleet jumping out of the system via the Hellas Gate. Petrov, we're on our way. So, we lost 5 ships, Schaefer identified. 3 disabled and drifting, Voight included. It could have gone a lot worse. Scant consolation, though, Schaefer sighed, warily. Liberator, Captain Heath of the Birmingham. We sustained a lot of damage in the last few seconds of the conflict, and our engines are malfunctioning. I'd like to transfer all of my non-engineering crew to the Liberator as a precaution. Permission granted, Captain. Hannah, Can we scan the Cadir wrecks and locate any potential survivors? Yes, sir.
Send the emergency crews to retrieve them, but not before every living fleet member has been rescued, Schaefer decided. Secure them in the prison. I want to know what this whole stupid incident was about.
Liberator, this is the Petrov. The remnants of the Cadir fleet are leaving on a trajectory that will take them directly to the border.
Good. They got the message, Schaefer assured. Reduce security level to DEFCON 2.
Schaefer ran his hand over his scalp, wiping away the sweat that had built up during the confrontation. He knew he had to say something to draw a line under the battle, some words of comfort, of reassurance. Nerves were fraught and needed to be soothed, but attention needed to be turned to the aftermath.
Liberator to fleet. I know the battle has been hard on all of you, but you have all been exemplary. We have defended the colony of Rokum Vendet and repelled the invasion fleet. The battle has cost us dear, true, but we can at least take some comfort in the Republic space is once again secure. Millions of people are safe because of your actions here today.
The words came relatively easily to Schaefer, not through any great act of oratory, but out of preparedness. He practiced these speeches in his quiet moments, aware that they may be needed one day. The exact contents were different, but he had used a number of prepared sentences and phrases in his speech. It was partly improvised, but the majority was rehearsed.
We've lost thousands of our colleagues, but the time for mourning will come later. For now, we must concentrate on the living and restoring our ships. Every life we save now brings hope for the future and brings meaning to the sacrifice of the fallen.
The responsibility weighed heavily on him. Many thousands were now dead. Would they have survived if he had played things a little differently? Had he been too slow in his decision-making? Should he have deployed the fleet in a different formation? His mind was full of questions that he could never answer, and the certainty he knew in battle was replaced by doubt. He turned to face the crew present in the command center.
Thank you all for performing your duties to the highest level. I am proud of all of you, Schaefer congratulated. Commander, could you join me in my office?
Voight followed Schaefer into his office, a small room with a desk and a few chairs. Schaefer took a seat and gestured for Voight to take one as well.
How are you feeling, Commander?
Exhausted. All the nervous energy seems to be deserting me.
It's terrifying, isn't it?
Sir?
Making decisions for the whole fleet, Schaefer indicated. It's okay to admit to being terrified. I certainly was.
You hide it well, sir.
Well, you can't display fear to those you lead. Who would follow a scared fool? And yet we all are, Schaefer explained. Point is, I just wanted to let you know that you were not alone in how you feel.
Thank you, sir, Voight responded. I'll admit that I was scared, especially with the scale of the fleet, but once everything started to happen, it was like a reflex. I didn't have time to consider what it was I was doing.
And now?
Starting to feel it again, to be honest.
You'll start wondering if you did all you could, whether your decisions were the correct ones. You'll start to doubt yourself, Schaefer considered. Unfortunately, there are no easy answers for this. You just have to be content that you did your best.
And that's how you feel at the moment?
Yes, but I believe I acquitted myself as best I could, Schaefer answered. I believe you did too.
Thank you, sir.
That's all I have to say, really. I just wanted to make sure you were all right. I know what stress can be like, Schaefer emphasized. Now, we should get back to it. There's still plenty to do.
Chapter 14. The prison was overflowing with captured Cadir. More than 700 had been found clinging to life in the wrecked Cadir ships, and there were possibly more out there. The survivors had been spread across the fleet, but the majority were in the Liberator's prison, the only ship with a full-sized place of incarceration. Hannah was startled when she first entered the prison. She hadn't met a Cadir up close, and their gelatinous nature instantly repelled her. The stink didn't help either, overpowering her with that repugnant, musty odor. "First time, then?" Voight bemusedly inquired. "That's obvious," Hannah responded.
come face to face with one when I was on the Benavides. The smell's quite something, isn't it? You're not kidding. I was raised to be open-minded and tolerant, to appreciate that which is different to us, Voight explained. It's a fine principle, and one that I believed in wholeheartedly, but it can be sorely tested sometimes. Hissing came from one of the holding cells, causing their Babel implants to activate.
Human vermin stink of unclean.
The Cadir's speech was a little fragmented, but understandable.
Vermin must be purified.
Hush now. Be grateful we pulled you from the wreckage, Voight chastised. We could have left you to die.
Now covered in human taint.
The Cadir and the holding cells were all similar in general appearance, but they did have unique features. The colorations, decoration, and armor growths were all unique. Hannah recalled that they all smelled unique as well, at least to each other. To her, the smell was something she didn't want to dwell on. They're not very grateful, Voight observed. I take it you want me to find out what they were doing in our space. Only if you feel up to it. I can't imagine what it must be like inside their minds, Voight added. But I hope it won't come to that.
Human telepath,
Cadir hissing revealed. There was an unmistakable change in the atmosphere of the holding cells. All the Cadir started to back away from Hannah, moving as far back into their cells as they could manage. It might have been her imagination, but it seemed even the smell changed, becoming more sour. Now that was unexpected. I don't need to read their minds to know they're afraid of me. Because of your telepathy. Because I'm human, Hannah corrected. If one of us touches their mind, they'll never feel clean again. Might even drive them mad. Oh, well, that might make our job easier then. You'll tell us everything we want to know, won't you? Hannah taunted. Just to stop me spreading my corruption inside you. More hissing.
Stay away. We'll talk.
You know, I thought they might be resistant to being questioned, Voight admitted. Never underestimate the power of irrational fear. Voight turned to one of the Cadir in the cells. So, you'll agree to answer our questions?
Keep her away, yes.
What's your name?
Hessenschil Gelastra Meson.
That's your name? The Cadir hissed in confirmation. Okay, Hess. Why were there two Cadir fleets fighting each other? Voight asked. Is there some kind of civil war going on?
Not civil war, it answered. Holy Empire and state separate.
So, there are two separate Cadir civilizations. This was news to Voight. As far as humanity knew, the Cadir Holy Empire encompassed the whole of Cadir society.
Yes.
And you are from?
State.
So how is the Cadir state different from Cadir Holy Empire?
Holy Empire mindless drones, slaves to dogma. State respect individual.
And you are at war with each other?
Always at war. State heretics in eye stalks of Holy Empire.
So, this is a battle in an ongoing war between the Cadir state and the Cadir Holy Empire.
Yes.
Why were both of your fleets in Republic space?
Fighting.
We know that. But why our space? You should have known we would respond.
Humans, vermin. Humans inconsequential.
I disagree. I think there have been nothing but consequences. Both of your fleets have been decimated, and here you are, confined in a cell with a human telepath, stood ready to violate you.
No violate. Talking.
The Babel implant was smart enough that it could pick up the subtle differences in speech and translate them too. Voight could hear its desperation. So, this was all just an internal war that you brought into our territory because you don't respect our boundaries? Marvelous, Voight sighed. So why haven't we heard about the Cadir state before now?
Humans need not know. Humans inconsequential.
This could have all been avoided if you made contact with us. We could have intercepted you before you got into a fight and escorted you back to your respective territories.
Rather die than ask human help.
Stubborn species, aren't you? Voight dismissed.
So how long has the Cadir state been around? 5, 7, 3 grells. Kane, do you know how long a grell is?
Yes, Commander. They are saying the Cadir state has been around for the equivalent of around 830 Triskel years.
And in all that time, not a peep out of you, Voight commented. The Holy Empire have been attacking us for the entirety of that time period. If you've been at war with them that whole time, you could have allied with us. Holy Empire may be enemy, still Cadir, humans below contempt. The state may be a separate entity, but it's still a civilization of slug supremacists, Hannah quipped. If there's one thing that's truly infinite in the universe, it's stupidity. Self-righteous humans, another Cadir hissed. Humans think humans smart, laughable. You think so? Humans destroy human worlds, stupid. That's not us, I'm afraid. Humans kill humans over money, stupid. Again, not us. All humans same, humans virus, humans occupy world, world dies. They do have a point, Hannah nodded. I guess we're done here then. The whole thing was just one big pointless... What happened, Cadir? The original Cadir asked. You'll all be taken to a detention center and interrogated, Voight explained. Once that is over, you'll be repatriated back to your respective territories with one condition. If either the Holy Empire or state enters Republic territory looking for a fight, they'll get more fight than they can handle. Cadir destroy humans, the second more belligerent Cadir piped up. Didn't go that way today, did it? And with that little barb, Voight left the prison with Hannah. Thank you for coming down, even if you weren't needed. Tell the truth, I'm glad about that. I didn't exactly relish the prospect of reading their minds. Would you have done? Voight inquired. If it was necessary. Answers were needed. Yes, I think so. I don't want you to think you have no choice, Hannah. I can live with it, Commander. Both you and the captain ask nicely, and that makes all the difference to me, Hannah answered. And people have made worse sacrifices today. And it infuriates me that we went through all of that and they didn't even care that they were in our space.
Chapter 15. Schaefer sat alone at his table in Pinkerton's, a bar located at the front of the Liberator. It was on the top deck, so it overlooked the front, over the nose of the ship, if you could call it that. The transparent hull around the outer wall offered a breathtaking view of the exterior. He liked Pinkerton's for the view, and also because it was one of the quieter bars. Part of that was due to the fact that it was seen like an officer's mess, and so some people kept their distance, and part of it was due to Eustace Pinkerton, who was grumpy in plain speaking. There was something Schaefer liked about him. Grumpy was honest. Grumpy was free of the artifice of customer service. It also helped that Eustace sold the best whiskies. He finished his current glass and stared at it forlornly, brooding over the events of the day. He hated the first recreation time after a battle. It was when he was at his most retrospective. Schaefer got up and stalked over to the bar. As he slid up to it, a large group of people entered and started taking seats around the side of the bar. Nikolai Sokolov strode up to the bar and acknowledged his presence. "Captain," he nodded. "Sokolov," Schaefer responded. "You holding awake?" Sokolov nodded. It was a tradition amongst pilots, and indeed many other combat roles, to mark the passing of their colleagues with a few drinks. It usually started off somber and got more raucous as time passed, but it was a necessary release. "I'm sorry for your losses," Schaefer added. 5 good pilots, Sokolov stated. 5 brothers and sisters. Pilots were a tight-knit group who felt their losses keenly. Many of them had known each other a long time, training together and forming deep bonds. "Eustace, get me 2 bottles of the Dunleaven and enough glasses for everyone." Usually Eustace would roll his eyes and grumble about having to source so many glasses at once, but this time he kept quiet and respectful. Schaefer walked over to the tables where the pilots sat and placed the 2 bottles down, whilst Eustace set up the glasses.
The pilots made room for Schaefer and Eustace to pour the drinks before they handed them out. He stood up with his glass in his hand and looked over the pilots.
This was only a small fraction of the total pilots, as most were still engaged in their duties.
These were the ones who were the most exhausted and traumatized, cycled off duty until they could recuperate.
5 good pilots gave their lives today in defense of the Republic. I know it can seem like cold comfort, but their sacrifice and dedication helped protect the 80 million people of Rokum Vendet. We should take consolation in that.
Again, some of these phrases were stock phrases he had used on multiple occasions. He hated the fact that he had repeated them so many times, but they were words of comfort for those who were grieving, so they served their purpose.
A pilot's role is a dangerous one, unforgiving and harsh. Pilots like yourselves accept this and put yourselves in harm's way in order to shield others. We all serve, but today you have all served with distinction. So let us remember those that have fallen, and let us mark their passing not with sadness, but with pride for who they were and what they died for.
Schaefer looked towards Sokolov as a prompt. Sokolov noted this and took over.
To Edmonds, Kublev, Dren, Lenis, and Korkorov, brave pilots who had given their lives so that we can be free.
They all raised their glasses in unison and stood in silence for a moment in quiet contemplation, and then swallowed the vintage whiskey.
Thank you, Captain, for your kind words, Sokolov announced. We know you have the bigger picture to deal with, so we appreciate the gesture. Yes, there is the bigger picture, Flight Commander, but we mustn't distance ourselves from the individual lives that have been lost, else we would lose perspective.
Schaefer answered.
It is our privilege to lead, but our burden to wear the weight of loss.
Schaefer excused himself and made his way back to the bar. He wasn't feeling too sociable at the moment, so he returned to his original position and returned to gazing into space, nursing a fresh drink. A few moments passed before he was interrupted.
Mind if I join you, Captain?
Voight announced her presence.
Be my guest,
Schaefer invited, indicating the chair on the opposite side of the table.
Just thought I'd give you a quick update in person.
Did you get answers from the Cadir?
Yes.
And?
Turns out the Cadir state is, as we suspected, a separate faction of Cadir currently at war with the Holy Empire, and has been for hundreds of years.
A separate faction that we've not been aware of until now.
They didn't see any need for us to know. Apparently we are beneath contempt.
Sometimes I do question the sanity of the universe, Schaefer sighed. Do we know what they were fighting about?
Seems like an ideological difference. The state seemed to reject their strict theocracy in favor for individualism.
Maybe it's something we could use to our advantage, but I doubt it.
Schaefer mused.
Are the state Cadir any different to the Holy Empire Cadir?
Nothing obvious beyond the ideological. Both factions hate us equally, it seems.
They should have kept their internal conflict in their own territory. Why involve us?
I don't think they even considered our response.
More than 20,000 dead because of their disdain for us.
If there's anything positive to be taken out of this, it's that it might put the Holy Empire off having one of their periodic crusades.
We can only hope.
We'll see if intelligence can get more details out of the prisoners. We certainly managed to rescue a lot of them, Voight indicated. Lots of work for them to do.
The sooner they're out of our hands, the better.
It's been a bad cycle, that's for sure, but it could have been worse. Losses would have been much worse if they hadn't continued fighting amongst themselves.
Maybe, but it doesn't alleviate any of my guilt, Schaefer responded. What could have been doesn't make what is any easier to endure.
No, not really, Voight concurred. Still, I have to get back to it. You get some rest, Captain.
I intend to, he agreed, but the same applies to you as well. If you need rest, delegate. I don't want you operating with a cloudy mind. Let someone else take up the slack.
I will, Captain. but I'm good for a little while longer." Schaefer's tone was friendly, but his point was serious. Rest was essential for any vocation, but especially so for those decision-makers who held the fates of many in their hands. It was common for people to push themselves beyond natural rest cycles in their dedication to duty, but Schaefer would rather have a fresh officer who took regular breaks than a sleepy one battling with exhaustion. "I intend to drown my sorrows for a while longer, then crash out. It's going to be a long day filled with bureaucracy and condolences."
Chapter 16. On the utopian planet of Fade, located close to the core of the Aleph Corporation's territory, lay the central administration. It was a beautiful city, designed to be as green and open as possible. Architects spent their whole lives toiling over the blueprints of each and every meter. Nothing was designed without good reason. Nothing was built without careful planning. Marcus Bazalian stared out of the conference room window, awaiting the arrival of the executives. The stunning sea view was majestic, sparkling beaches lining the coast as it curved away from the building. Below was a large green space, a park leading away from the building, separated from the coast by a strip of recreational buildings. The sun shone overhead, the distant red dwarf that was its binary twin faintly visible beside it. It was a glorious day on Fade. Marcus turned slightly and caught his reflection in glass to the side of the window. Even though it was a faint reflection, it caught his image well, bathing his handsome visage in a gentle glow. His square jaw commanded authority, yet his impish blue eyes suggested a mischievous personality underneath. He touched his dark hair gently, unwilling to disturb such sculptured perfection, yet unable to resist it. His clothes also suggested seductive personality traits. The jacket spoke of a business-like efficiency, whilst the pastel shirt indicated approachability. He tried not to be a vain individual, but there were times when he caught himself reflected and couldn't help but pause and admire.
"They're on their way, Marcus."
Alita Maluk entered the room and walked toward her assigned position around the table. She was a stunning brunette with chiseled looks and perfect hair, tied back into a ponytail. Her light brown skin was flawless, not one blemish anywhere. And then there were her eyes, piercing blue eyes that were, genetically speaking, an unusual mix with their chosen ethnicity, but not without precedent. It was something she'd added into the body's DNA template, the only holdover from her original body. Everything about her screamed desirable, yet focused. The executives started to filter in, each one of them a specimen of total and utter physical perfection. No matter what age they were perfect examples of that age group. There were no blemishes, no unsightly fat, no dysmorphia. As he watched them take their seats, he was reminded of the current slogan, "This is Aleph, where you can be the best version of yourself." Marcus looked across the table, surveying all the executives and then focusing on the far wall and the water feature built into it, water trickling down crystal rocks with the Aleph brand name carved into them. The final two seats were populated by remote projections, drawn by the devices hanging above each of the seating positions. They weren't as sophisticated as a remote conferencing suite, but they served their purpose in representing the absent members. "It's a beautiful morning in Hermoso Luga, and I'm glad to see all of you looking so fresh and full of vigor," Marcus announced with effortless charm, his declaration being met with a sea of polite smiles. "I'm sorry Vito and Leslie couldn't be here to see it, but believe me when I tell you it's going to be one hot day."
"All part of the sacrifices we make,"
Leslie responded to a remote telepresence. "Now it's been a full 11 Fade days since we all last met, and I know we've all been very busy in the build-up to the release of the Xenon Media Pad, but we do have a few items to discuss," Marcus continued. "By the way, Melissa, good work on sorting out that issue with the operating system." Melissa made a gesture of acknowledgement, animated for a moment before becoming inert again. "The first issue was, of course, the impending release date. We're just 10 days away from the system-wide release and 20 days away from the inner core release date. Projections suggest over 1 billion units sold in the first 5 days alone," Marcus announced, with some giddy glee. "We shouldn't celebrate just yet, of course, but things are looking very positive. Ryan?
The hype around the release has reached a phenomenal level. There are people queuing outside Aleph outlets already, and some have been there for days, Ryan added. Normally, we hold back around 50% of the stock for a short period to create that artificial demand, but local police chiefs are so worried about public disorder, we've issued instructions to release that stock should tensions flare.
Can you believe that? Marcus exclaimed,
jubilantly. Production has been ramped up to cope with the projected demand. Fortunately, thanks to the redundancy built into the plan, we should have enough capacity to cope.
It's always heartwarming to see such demand for our products, Marcus grinned. So, good work, everyone. But we need to stay focused until the release date for the Outer Rim. Once we've reached full coverage, then we can afford to relax a little.
It was a critical juncture for Aleph. The new media pad was a major product release for them, and ambitions were high. Still, now the initial euphoria of positive news had passed, Marcus's demeanor started to become more serious.
This brings us on to the second item. Law and order. We've seen a major drop in criminal activity. Nothing unusual in that prior to a major product release. There has, however, been a spike in the number of bombings by the Eroi terrorist group. We've seen incidents on Boris, Megara, Sophia, Entropic Mons, and Vostok in the past few weeks. This isn't disastrous by any means, but it is an escalation, and we cannot allow it to continue. Can you place that on your task list as a priority, please, Michael?
We'll reassign some of the police units from neighboring colonies. Given the reduction in crime levels, this shouldn't cause any disruption.
Good. We've tolerated the Eroi for far too long, and these latest outrages are a reminder of that. How many people have died in the attacks?
Latest estimates say around 450, Michael elaborated.
Any threat to stability is a threat to our ability to operate. The Eroi may be a minor nuisance now, but we don't want that nuisance to start eating into our profits.
There was a collective nodding around the room.
There has been one other incident off late which is of some concern. Alita, could you go through the details?
Alita took control of the narrative and started to speak with a serious tone. Less than 36 Fade hours ago, we lost contact with the colony of Cantor Alpha. Cantor, for those who are not aware of it, is home to one of the older Aleph shipyards. It's little more than a spaceship graveyard now, but some refits of the older generation ships still occur there, Alita stated. Earlier this morning, rescue crew entered the system to find the colony and the shipyard destroyed.
Destroyed by whom?
We don't know. Any trace of the attackers has been wiped from the system, and no surveillance remains, Alita replied. This in itself is suspicious. It suggests some form of electronic warfare was employed to stop any signal leaving the system. That would require a level of sophistication at the state level. Heavy use of nuclear weapons to scour the evidence supports this.
This means that it is unlikely to be criminal or piracy. The chances are that this is another state acting against us.
For what reason?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? Without knowing who it was, motivation is difficult to divine.
Given proximity, the most obvious suspects would be the UCH or the Cadir, Alita deducted. But without evidence, we cannot be certain, and it wouldn't be beyond the ability of other state actors to stage something like this to provoke a confrontation for their own ends, so we need to tread carefully here.
Agreed. It's dangerous to act upon known for sure. Let's reduce the risk to ourselves where we can.
The loss of life is one thing, but Cantor is a strategic system. Granted, nowhere near as strategic as it once was, but it did service some of the older vessels. Now, why this system? Why not one of the more important shipyards? It's too big a target for an organization like the Eroi, but a somewhat low priority for a state target.
Maybe it was a covert strike to take out a low-priority target, like picking off a few weak spots before attacking something more important, one of the executives suggested.
Possibly, but it seems a high-risk strategy, Alita reacted. Military intelligence is investigating, but as of this moment, we don't have any answers.
Needless to say, this incident has a DNC notice on it until further notice. You are not to communicate this to anyone else. No need panicking anyone till we know more, Marcus emphasized. At the moment, this is an isolated incident, an anomaly. Until we know more, that's all it is.
Marcus studied the other executives, gauging their reactions. There was horror
confusion, distress, and indignance. But he didn't see anything that he would deem unexpected. He didn't think there would be a security leak at this level. Everyone was too well off to ever consider it. Even so, it paid to be a little paranoid.
The last issue I want to address is the military service take-up rate. Marcus switched. It's fallen for the 5th straight quarter. Now, some fluctuation is to be expected, but this is starting to become a trend. We need to arrest this decline as soon as possible, else we're going to start having crew shortages. Anyone have any suggestions? Why can't we introduce conscriptions like the other corporations? Randall, I know you're new to the executive team, but we don't like to use the C word round here. It doesn't play well with the public. Till, Young, and Heller are corporations. We're a cooperative, where everyone is part of a big extended family, Marcus corrected. As for conscription, it's a difficult idea to sell. It's important that the public have the choice, or at least the illusion of it. Take that away and people start resenting the concept. No, conscription is the last resort. Anyone else? Do we know why it's falling? The focus groups haven't really been able to produce any hard evidence of an underlying dissatisfaction. There seems to be a lot of reasons across the board, but nothing that particularly stands out. Has service lost its prestige? Most of those surveyed still believe service opens doors and provides opportunity, so that appears unaffected. Maybe they feel it's just not enough. Maybe we need to offer more. Special offers always work, but let's not go to that unless we have nothing else. Perhaps the service guarantee opportunity formula needs to be a little more tangible, one executive named Anish suggested. In what sense? Everyone knows that looks open doors. Why not include some free cosmetic surgery into the induction package? Isn't that a little crass? Marcus, you've seen the entertainment streams. Refinement is in short supply. Sure, some people will think it is, but to the majority, it's just another bonus, Anish added. And it plays in well with Aleph's mission. Be the best version of yourself. I'm not sold on this. Naturally, we only allow them to redeem this bonus after their service is completed. That should reduce the costs. That I like. It's just a suggestion. Marketing could do some research into the viability, but I have a feeling that the public will buy into it, Anish reasoned. It's a more physical manifestation of the ideal, but that's why it will work. It can't be anything too drastic. We don't want to lose any of our influence. Of course, little increments based on leaving rank. Just enough to make them feel like it's going to change things, but not enough that it actually does. What about the cost? There's a lot of surgeons offering procedures out there. I'm sure we could recruit an army of them at a very competitive rate. Okay then. Clara, can you get marketing to have a look at this, please? Marcus conceded. Anyone else?
What about updating our media campaign for recruitment? Maybe the public have just become too jaded by the current campaign, and the celebrities that endorse it do lose their shine over time.
That's not a bad idea, Clara. Can you add that to the list? Marcus instructed.
Can we suggest to the stream makers on Morpheus a few more militaristic stories? Nothing that looks like obvious propaganda, just a little swerve into that direction.
As long as you can keep it positive, yes, Marcus agreed. Anything else? The room went quiet. Well, that's a few suggestions anyway. Clara, if you could take those away and do some analysis, we'll revisit this next time we meet. If any of you have a suggestion in the meantime, just send me a message. Marcus's tone got a little more upbeat again. The items that needed to be covered had been done, and they were approaching the finale. Has anyone else got anything to add to the agenda for today? There was more silence. Okay then. I know you're all keen to get on with your days, so I'll let you go. We'll arrange for another catch-up soon, but if anything comes up that's urgent, we may bring that forward. There was a collection of farewells and light conversation as they started to get up and leave the room, the two telepresences switching off. Alida, can you let me know as soon as you hear anything on the Cantor situation?
Sure, Marcus.
If this is the prelude to something bigger, we need to be ready for it. The more information we have, the sooner we can prepare. Chapter 17. Grand Harmonizer Pyotr Videk sat in quiet contemplation in his sacred briefing room. One of his cardinals handed him a cup with some tea in it, which he sipped gently. The sojourn into Aleph space had been achieved with little blowback, and there had been no mention of it through diplomatic channels. Aleph were probably examining the system right now, but the lack of outrage suggested they had been successful in masking their presence. Cardinal Kaigan entered the room, the huge oak doors parting for him. "Your Holiness," he submitted. "Rise, Cardinal," Videk acknowledged. "How goes your plan?" "We are currently selecting and training crew for the acquired ships. Recruitment is going well, but it's going to take a little while to train the crew in Aleph ship design." "Not too long, I hope." "The principles are the same. It's just familiarization with their systems. They can be flown now, but if we can improve the efficiency, they will look and react more naturally and give the operation more credence." "I see," Videk responded. "How about a target system? Have you selected a suitable one?" "In order to select a number of candidates, we judged them on several criteria: size, defenses, proximity to major military locations. One of the key criteria was to make it close to the Aleph border, but not too close," Kaigan related. And there has to be a reason that would be beneficial to Aleph." "So you're giving the operation a context?" "The deception will work better if it all makes sense. The mission may well not need it with the Cadir, but covering as many possibilities as we can will just add to the authenticity." "I understand. What candidates do you have?" "There are 5 in total, all systems with a single Cadir colony, little in the way of defenses or nearby support, and they all possess some element of strategic advantage. 4 of them being good places in the jump gate topology, and the 5th containing a high concentration of rare elements." "They jump into the system, destroy the colony, and then wait for the response." "The battleship will feign engine trouble, making it appear that they cannot slide. This will give a reason for their lingering, should it take the Cadir time to respond," Kaigan strategized. "If the Cadir jump into the system with a fleet of equal size or below, they are to engage. If the Cadir fleet is larger, they are to flee and draw the Cadir closer to Aleph space. Again, technical issues will prevent them from getting to presumed safety, slowing them up until the Cadir destroy them." "What if the Cadir don't pursue?" "In that eventuality, or if it takes too long for them to respond, the fleet is to find a secondary target and repeat. It's inconsistent with established Aleph tactics, but still plausible." "And the crews are all committed to the mission objectives?" "They are all devoted disciples, Your Holiness." Videk stood up, prompting some bustling from the cardinals. Grabbing his stick, he started to walk towards the stained glass window. His hips started to ache, which slowed him a little, but he was still capable. He'd been putting off an operation for some time, and the pain was gradually getting worse, but he felt a little suffering was good for the soul. "It is a grim responsibility to send those good men and women to their deaths, but it will serve the greater good," Videk contemplated. "Be sure to compensate their families, by the way. The Church must provide for the faithful." "Yes, I will ensure that." Videk reached the stained glass window and peered through it, viewing the world outside through a colored filter. "When I set up the Church, I did so with 2 distinct purposes. The first was to provide hope and meaning to the people, and the second was to provide for them, paying them back for their investment, both spiritually and practically," Videk revealed. "The Laval Corporation provided neither, and yet they seemed surprised when the Church took root and destroyed them from within." Smiling gently, he savored the memory. The Unified Church of Humanity had been persecuted to begin with, only for it to escalate when the Laval Corporation started to see them as an existential threat. So many of his followers were killed during those years, but they had prevailed. He rose from agitator to terrorist to leader to emperor, not that he ever considered himself in those terms, within a decade. It hadn't been from personal ambition, but genuine desire to improve the lives of those around him. "We grew out of the moral decay of the corporation because we offered what they were not willing to, and we persist because we adhere to those principles." His words grew in volume as some of his fiery passion rose to the surface.
a glimmer of the man he had once been. He still felt the same way, but the strength of feeling was so much more tiring than it used to be.
Those who make the ultimate sacrifice, to them we owe a debt of obligation, an obligation to bring their families into the loving embrace of the Church and to provide for them. They will be provided for, and their sons and daughters will follow their shining examples. Well put, Cardinal, Videk praised. One last thing. How will we know when the fleet has achieved its purpose? The fleet will be sending a coded stream toward Aleph space, where we will have a ship ready to intercept the signal and relay it back to us. There will be a time delay, but it will allow us to follow their final moments without arousing suspicion. Excellent. If all goes well, we'll have the Cadir and Aleph fighting each other, and we can then attack when they are weakened, Videk cheered. Hopefully we can purge the universe of those filthy slugs.
You've been watching The Void. Please like and comment on the video, and subscribe to the channel. It helps greatly. See you in the next chapter.